Right, here we go. Donnie Vincent, it's great to have you on, mate. You're a hard man to track down.
Yeah, sorry about that. I appreciate being on, man. This is really cool.
I've been bugging you for a little while, probably a few months now, to try and get you on, mate. But no, like I said, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm looking forward to the episode.
If you could contact me in any other way besides using a computer, you would have got me right away, but I really disdain opening a computer.
Man of my own heart, I like it. Mate,
I love
I
it.
have. I've seen recently, mate. You've been on the mats with a bit of jiu-jitsu stuff. Is that something you've just started, and how are you finding it, mate?
Yeah, I started probably about a year ago, and it's not a consistent year because I travel so much, right? In the fall, I'm gone so often that I can't train. But uh, in the beginning, I started out. I found a really great gym in the town that I live in, Hudson, Wisconsin, called Alliance, and the instructor there, Brian Olson, he's an amazing man. Uh, Olympian for years and years for the United States in judo, and then now as a black belt. I think several degrees over in jujitsu. But anyway, yeah, man, it's been life changing, to be honest with you. I walked in there as another way, another form of fitness, and then I've always wanted to technically learn how to fight. I've always felt like I had the mentality of a warrior and things that I've always addressed in my life and how I've always carried myself. But just in the modern era of learning from different people that are talented and tested and trained, I quickly realized that there's trained and there's untrained, and man, I wanted to fall on the side of trained in everything that I do, or I want to fall on the side of trained, and it's been life changing. Honestly, it has had as almost as great an impact on my life as hunting has, because of the community of fighters that I found on the mat. And I went from training twice a week to now when I'm in town, I'll train 5, 6, 7 hours a week. And it's been remarkable.
Can be quite humbling, right, in the beginning.
Oh, it's quite humbling every single time. Yeah, I take generally I do three types of classes. I'll do a fundamentals class, which is of course like
Yep.
choreography, right? Moving through the motions. Then I'll take an intermediate class, which is uh, about 10 minutes of fundamentals or 20 minutes of fundamentals, and then 30 to 40 minutes of all out, basically 100% rolling. And then I take another class on Saturday mornings, which is about an hour and 15 minutes of like straight full rolling. And I don't care who it's against, a blue belt, a double stripe white belt, whatever, who has 50 pounds of muscle on me, whatever it is. Um, it's two things. I found two things, and I'm not talking macho. One, it's incredibly humbling. And if you think you can fight your way out of any situation, you're absolutely dead wrong.
Hmm.
A, and B, it's also remarkable. I found for myself, although with my background, it wasn't a total surprise, but I'm remarkably comfortable being in very uncomfortable positions. I'm very calm being in very dangerous positions.
And you often find yourself. I spent a little bit of time over the years. I got the old purple there, mate. About a couple of years ago now. To be honest, I had to dust the cobwebs off. Actually, I went looking for it tonight because I haven't. I've been out of the game for a couple of years now, like probably about nearly 2 years. Just I was taking up all these new things, and I had to give something. I had to give, but I was having a bit of
Yeah.
arthritis in my hands and stuff. But yeah, like you said, yeah, it can be quite humbling. And the community, it seems like that in the same in the hunting community, and like I have a dive focus with the spearfishing and stuff. These communities of people, you meet some great humans, right?
Oh, the best. The community of men. If you would have asked me if men like this existed in my town, I probably would have shrugged my shoulders, because the guys that I see walking down the street, not that you can judge a book by its cover, certainly I've learned that as well. But the guys you see walking down the street, and and certainly the guys you see standing outside of bars, not that I'm one that really goes to bars, but you see guys standing outside of bars, kind of shrugging my shoulders. But the men that I found in this gym, in this community, warriors,
Mm.
absolute warriors. You know, whether they're chubby or shredded warriors.
Doesn't matter, does it? Yeah, that's the thing. I remember when I first rocked up. There'd be, I'm not a big guy, but there'd be a really small, slender sort of a guy or even a girl, for instance, and then they will be handing your ass to you on a platter on those open mat nights, man. And you're like, holy shit, I got to get better at this. I got to
Oh,
learn this stuff, right?
like just the littlest nerdy guy,
Mm,
call it, just
they kill
tear
you.
you up. And I rolled with this guy who's 66 years old. He's a black belt in judo, black belt in karate, and a multiple degree black belt in jujitsu. And he just kind of laid back on the mat to start. He just laid back, and I was standing above him, and he just goes, "Yeah, come on, Donnie." And so I get into the fight and everything, and then yeah, I took his back, and I'm pretty sure he let me take his back, but I took his back, and and as I was taking his back, I was coming up to get in a position to choke him, and he looked back at me and he said, "Hey man, you're winning the fight." He said, "I can feel your pecs and your abs in my back. I can feel every muscle in your body." He's like, "You're winning. Just relax." And he just taught me so much about stay calm and don't use your energy and don't use your oxygen
Yeah,
and
yeah.
quietly use your strength and slowly move into position. And it's been so rewarding, man. And yeah, like you said, um there's this young lady that I roll with occasionally. She's half my size, and she's she's several degrees of white belt above me. She's actually almost a blue belt, but I describe her as kind of like trying to put a jellyfish in your pocket. Like no matter how you think you've got her in your pocket, the other portion of her is coming out of the other side of your pocket. You know what I mean? Like she
Yeah.
is always squeezing out and moving position, and seeing how she moves and is never caught in a trap is just as impressive as fighting an MMA guy, which we have at the gym also, that just basically ties you in a knot and chokes you out in a few seconds.
Oh yeah, I've been there plenty of
Yeah.
times. Wake up. What happened? It's all good, mate. You had a little snooze.
Yeah. Am I choking me or are you choking me?
Good times, mate. Yeah, I did see that, and I thought, oh, I sort of resonated with that a little bit. But yeah, I was keen to,
Yeah.
the people that I speak to about it. Yeah, it's definitely that real community spirit and leaving that ego at the door. It's a real big one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mate, moving on a little bit there. So you've obviously lived a life like heavily focused in the outdoors and a lot of travel and etc. in your life, mate. What does that lifestyle mean to you? And yeah, how important is that lifestyle to you, mate?
Yeah, it's not a lifestyle, Andy. It's my heartbeat. It's my breath. And I know that sounds contrived, but really just being outside and seeing the mountains and seeing the prairies, deserts, wherever I happen to be. I was standing um yesterday at this time, a little bit later than this. Yesterday I was standing next to the ocean in Alaska, watching beluga whales feed on salmon. It has nothing to do with hunting. I was just standing there in the early fall sun, late summer sun, and I was watching a pod of beluga whales and two pilot whales chase down salmon and feed on them in Kachemak Bay, Alaska. And I'm back in Wisconsin now, but it's been everything for me. Whether it be when I was a little kid and looking for frogs or snakes, or even just watching ducks fly overhead, it didn't matter. Is literally all I wanted to do was hunt and fish and be around wildlife. And really what it boils down to, I get a lot of guys that write letters to me or whatever, and I appreciate it and love it, but they'll write to me and say, "I'm absolutely sick for hunting. I want to hunt. That's all I ever want to do. How do I get to do what you do for a career?" And it's not that I'm sick for hunting. It's really that I'm crazy to be in these wild systems and to watch caribou and grizzly bears and moose. I want to be around them. I don't necessarily have to hunt them. The hunting part of it just comes from inside of me, of wanting to start a fire at a cabin, wanting to watch my arrow go into a moose and watch that moose die quickly. So I see myself skinning it. I don't just see myself holding this massive rack and putting photos on Instagram and saying, "Oh, everyone look at me! I killed a 70-inch moose." I don't care one iota about that. I want to touch the moose's antlers. I want to skin the moose. I want to see how difficult it is to peel the meat off the carcass and the weight of it to carry it back to camp. And I want to cook it over a frying pan and look up at the night sky. That's it. To me, it's just being alive, is living my life, is doing that stuff. And so it's not a hobby or anything like that. It's just truly who I am.
Man, that's awesome, bro. How did this begin? Were there early influences? Like, did your dad get you into this sort of stuff? Like, did you spend a lot of time as a kid outdoors, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so my dad, it's really hard. And I'm not crazy close with my dad. I am, but we don't have the type of relationship where we talk every week and we talk about everything, which I wish we did, but that's just not in the cards. Um, but my dad had a really fantastic book collection when I was growing up. His parents bought him a book subscription, and for whatever reason, my dad was really good at collecting all these different books on both on war. He had several books on war. My dad was in the Navy, and then he had a lot of books on wilderness survival and outdoor cooking and fishing, hunting, wildlife, things like this. Audubon books, all these different, birding books and just general wildlife books. And so I just lived in that bookshelf, and my dad had a collection of guns in a walnut gun case in the corner that had it's a type of gun case that just had two glass sheets of glass with a lock in the middle, and so I was kind of able to put all the pieces together. The books gave me the inspiration to want to be in the wilderness and gave me the inspiration to even be a warrior. It wasn't until recently that I actually tied these two things together, because I have quite an affinity for people in law enforcement. I have quite an affinity for military warriors, soldiers, men and women that fight for the United States or even fight for countries of our allies, and um and it's always kind of tied into one for me. Is when I meet a Navy SEAL, when I meet Army Rangers or whatever that I'm happening to be filming with or working with, I just kind of see a hunter. And I know that's strange to say, but that's how I kind of identify with them, is even though whether they hunt or not, I see a hunter. And so these books gave me this great inspiration. My dad would hunt once, twice, three times a year, and just seeing him kind of pack up gear and leave with his buddies and then come back, and I'd try to pry. My dad's not a big talker, but I would pry stories from him of, "Hey, did you see any deer? Did you shoot any grouse?" And he would, "Yeah, hey, we got two," or he'd tell me little tidbits, and I'd have to kind of piece all this together. But um, all of that was fantastic inspiration of what I want to do for a career and where I want to go in my life. But really, I think those books lent me um, great inspiration, especially there are several that were penned by an author named Jack O'Connor, and it was terribly inspiring to read his work.
Yeah, right, mate. And was that the inspiration for your study, like animal biology? Correct me if I'm wrong there, but you went and studied animal biology. Was that a natural progression from there for you, and a way to, like you said, live the life that you thought that you desperately wanted, or you knew from a young age by the sounds of it that that was the path you wanted to go down?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about wildlife biology. I wasn't smart enough or in tune enough with myself or the world around me. I was probably in tune with myself enough, but I wasn't in tune with the world around me to actually even know what careers were available to me, to even think about what the future held for me. Once I got to a certain age of getting out of high school and starting to take some college classes, because that's what I thought successful people did, is you try to go to college and move forward. And so once I started kind of looking at that, very quickly I eliminated all the regular jobs, if you will. It's not that I'm not going to do that. Or can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I have no interest in 9 to 5, no interest in going to the office, no interest in kind of being a paid slave, if you will. It just wasn't for me. And so, a friend of mine, we were having lunch one day, and a friend of mine came and he said, "Hey, check this out." And it was a brochure for the College of Natural Resources, and there's a moose on the cover. And he's like, "I don't know what you're going to do, but you got to check this out. There's a moose on the cover of this booklet, and if you're going to get a degree, like, this has got to be the degree." And so I started looking into wildlife biology, and of course I knew what wildlife biologists were, but I didn't know what the job kind of held. And so once I started reading through it and thought, oh, I can take ichthyology classes and mammalogy classes, and I can, take different chemistries and physiologies, and I was like, yeah, this is really cool. And so, that's, I just wanted to be around the animals still, and I wanted to adventure, right? So even when I got out of school, I just wanted to get the coolest jobs in the far off places, right? Because I wanted to adventure. I didn't want to just study. A lot of guys, they want to study whitetail deer because they love deer, so they want to study whitetail deer and just work at home. But I wanted to adventure. I wanted to, get on little airplanes and get on big boats and, see crocodiles and do all crazy stuff.
Yeah, right. And then is that what took you? You went and studied tigers in overseas, like Nepal or something. Is that correct?
Nepal and Bangladesh.
How long was that for, mate? And how was that experience?
I was just for a couple of months in a single year, and the experience was absolutely wild. There's a professor at the University of Minnesota, Dr. David Smith, and he's basically the most renowned tiger ecologist in the world. He's made it his entire life to study tigers, and from Thailand and Nepal, Bangladesh, all over. And he invited me to go on a trip. We started out in Bangladesh and we ended in Nepal. In Bangladesh, we were studying in the Sundarbans. It's the world's largest mangrove swamp. It was. I go back now, and I wish I could go back to that place now. And now with all the experiences that I've had, and kind of dive into it at a different time, because I was such a punk kid at the time that I didn't really, I tried to harness as much as I could, but to see that experience now and to think about that experience and being in the jungle and being in the Sundarbans and the tigers and cobras, the crocodiles and sharks, and, seeing all these different animals all the time. And it was crazy. It was really crazy. It was really dangerous. There were a lot of pirates there.
Mhm.
I had armed guards with me at all times, and even they were a little bit sketchy. There's just, things were really interesting. And I swam in areas that I probably had no business swimming. Saw animals, and I was around animals that I had really no business in being around. And then from there, we traveled up to the Royal Chitwan National Forest in southern Nepal, and in there I went to work on an elephant every day, Andy. So, like,
Wow.
early in the morning, I'd get up, and literally an elephant with a rider would come and pick me up at my cabin. I'd get up on this, big female elephant, and we'd go work every day, because otherwise, you risk, if we were just going to walk around the jungle, we'd risk, being taken by a tiger,
Hmm.
because the grass is so tall and the jungle's so thick, and it has, there's Indian rhinos there, and there's just a lot of dangerous wildlife there. So we'd work on the elephants, which was, absolutely insane. One time I was on this elephant, and the drivers, they're really careful with the elephants, but they also can be kind of harsh if the elephant's not doing what they want. And they ride barefoot, and so they use their toes to basically kind of like touch behind her ear to tell her which way they want her to go, and then they have commands for her to, to kneel down so that we can get off and go to the bathroom or whatever. And one time I was on this elephant, and I saw this little cat, this little, leopard looking, I don't know what species it was because it happened so fast, but like a little civet cat, like a little, like, cloud cat looking thing. and it went into this bush. And I asked the driver, it's like, hey, I'd really love to get a photograph of that. And he's like, okay. And so we go over to this bush, and literally when I'm ready to take the photo, the elephant goes down with her trunk and literally kind of gooses this cat in the butt and gets the cat to jump out of the bush so I can get a photo of it. Like the elephant basically kind of knows what I'm looking for here, and she does it. And then when I'm done taking the photo of the cat, we want to move on, and I have a computer with tigers on it with wearing different radio collars, so I can see where these cats are. And we're doing different um, study to kind of see how the tigers are using their habitat, and the elephant wouldn't walk. The driver's trying to encourage the elephant to walk, and she wouldn't walk, and he kind of taps her on the head with this little bamboo rod, and she looks back and she wouldn't walk. And long story short, he's getting a little bit more aggressive with trying to get her to move. And I'm like, hey, it's okay. Like, she'll move when she's ready. Well, here I had dropped my pencil from my clipboard, and I didn't know that I dropped my pencil, and the driver didn't know that I dropped my pencil, but she knew that I had dropped
Mm.
my pencil. And
Yeah.
so she was searching in these tall grasses with her trunk for my pencil. And then all of a sudden, she comes up with her trunk with my pencil in it and hands me my pencil. And then as soon as I had my pencil, she started walking. So the reason
Wow.
she wouldn't go is because she knew I dropped my pencil. It's just incredible. But so yeah, I went and did those things. They were crazy, dangerous, exhilarating, thrilling. It was amazing for him to invite me to do that. And a biologist dream, an opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity to go to those places. And when you're there, you don't realize that it's once in a lifetime. You're like, oh, cool, I'm in Bangladesh. I'll be back someday. But
Mm.
the reality is, that place is not for tourists. Excuse me, and it's not for anyone that isn't. Uh, when you go to places like Bangladesh, and you go to places like where we went and studied, unless you know what you're doing, it's a one-way trip.
Yeah. Wow.
You're not coming out.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah, really crazy. Yeah, the pirates, the crocodiles, the people, like it. You're not coming out. No way.
And then, mate, you also obviously doing my research, but you spent some time studying salmon in Alaska. Is that right?
That's the real work that I did. I studied rough grouse in northern Minnesota for a very short time, helping a friend of mine finish his PhD. I did the tiger work over 2 years and a couple of months. Um, but really, the body of the work that I did was for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, studying salmon. Like, that was a real job. That was my paycheck. That was really forwarding myself as a biologist and actually contributing to the science up in Alaska and to the fisheries. And so, yeah, for 4 years, I would go up there every year and basically live in a tent for 4 to 5 months over the summer in a remote research camp and study Pacific salmon for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah. Wow. Another crazy experience. A lot of, like a common theme rolling out here, but yeah, travel and wildlife and just living out in those bush areas, right?
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I didn't want to do any laboratory work. I didn't want to be in town. A lot of biologists, or I shouldn't say a lot, but some, they want the desk job. They want to go home every night. They want to go to the grocery store. They want to do this stuff. That was the last thing I wanted. I wanted to go, when they interviewed me, it's funny. We worked so hard in school, and I was waiting for questions to be asked to me about biology. What do you know about fish? What do you know about systems? What do you know about salmon in general? I was waiting for all these questions. I had prepared myself. They didn't have any questions about fish. They didn't have any questions about biology. They wanted to know if they could drop me off in nowhere. They wanted to know if I could drive a boat in difficult conditions. They wanted to know if I could sleep in a tent for months on end. They wanted to know if I was going to get homesick or scared. They wanted to know if they were going to have to send a helicopter in to rescue me because I shot myself in the leg, or they wanted to know if I could make it They wanted to know where my mind was, what was my mentality, where was my mental strength and my physical strength. Were they going to have to come get me? Was it going to be, were they going to have to abort mission? That's what they wanted to talk about in the interview.
Yeah, wow.
And I was like, yeah, absolutely not.
I'll be right. Mate, was that solo you doing that or were there other people out there?
It's other people out there. At times I was solo, but there generally would be four people. So it'd be two, call it U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologists, and then there'd be two Yupik men that we would switch out. Eskimos from a local village. The research that we were doing was on their land, and so we did a co-project. And so part of the engagement rules for the co-project is we would hire two men from the village to come up every 2 weeks and kind of help us with different aspects of the study, which is a really rewarding aspect of the study. I became dear friends with some of the Eskimo men there, and it had its challenges as well. I have some horrible stories and I have some funny stories, but it had certain challenges. And but a lot of the time it was just two of us, and then when the Eskimo guys were up and helping us with the project, there'd be four of us in camp.
Yeah, wow. Heard you telling a crazy wolf story. You befriended a pack of wolves. I heard that story.
Yep. It's happened before, and it's not totally unique to where I was. It had never happened where exactly where I was, but I'd heard about it happening to other biologists where wolves kind of move into their camp because they realize it's a really good place for fishing, right? Where we're doing our research in a part of the river that just happens to be shallow and clear and easily, generally, until there's rains and big floods, which happens, but generally navigable. And we're able to actually look at the fish, work with the fish, speciate the fish through the clear water. So it just so happens that where we're doing our research also happens to be really good fishing grounds for wolves and bears. And but I did, in messing around, we heard a wolf pack one night and howling, and I was howling to them, and I would howl, they would howl. And then the next night, or maybe a few nights later, I think it was the next night, the howling happened again, but it was half the distance or even closer. And I walked down to, our camp was on an outside cut bank, so it was up on kind of a 15 or so foot cliff above the river, and our camp was up there on the tundra. And I walked to the edge of the river because it sounded like the wolves might be down in this little alder flat, which was on the inside bend of the river. And that's when I saw what I guessed at the time, and it turned out to be a female wolf. She came out on the sandbar, and she was just kind of like walking up and down fishing. And I howled at her, but I just did little, like, I do little like, oh, 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 little community, not just ripping a howl, but I would just make little dog noises. And she just instantly, she snapped and looked up and then she just sat down straight away, straight up, looking right at me. And then she made a little noise. And then I basically would just mimic her noise. And when I would mimic her noise, you could see her, she was, I'm anthropomorphizing this, but she'd be like, what? Like, he just said what I said, kind of thing. She looked flabbergasted, and then she lay down staring at me, and I'd make another noise and kind of do these little like, kind of little noise. And yeah, it was just cool engaging with her. And then she went away, and then I went down there fishing, and I took a photo of this, but I went down there fishing, and I was fly fishing, and it was always I was never worried, but it was always a little nerve wracking because the alders, which the grizzly bears use, are basically right up to my back. And I saw one bear, and that thing was, it's one of the biggest bears I've ever seen in my life, but it looked like a Volkswagen Beetle walking by my tent. But every night I would go fly fishing. And every morning when I was down on the river, my tracks would be covered by grizzly bear tracks, but I never saw the bears, right? They were there, but I never saw them. except for that one. Oh, he was a monster. But but so when I was fly fishing down there, I was always just kind of aware that the alders were right behind me. And so anyway, I say, I think I said this on Rogan, but I say like I felt something watching me. But the truth is, I was looking over my shoulder all the time.
Mm.
And so, I kept looking over my shoulder, but then I looked, I was looking at this kind of menagerie of alders, which for your listeners is kind of like a bushy tree with trunks, up to about this big or whatever. And they kind of grow out, picture like a Medusa's hair, and they have big green leaves and these little almost like pine cones on them. And then, when the fall comes, all the leaves fall down, but it ends up being this kind of like tangle of gray limbs. And that's where the grizzly bears really like to sleep during the day. But I look back at the alders, and then this little space, I can see her face and the wolf. And she's only, man, she's probably 10 yards behind me, 8 yards behind me, something like that. She's real close. And then, so I saw her and I was like trying to get my camera out and I took a picture of her. But then while I was fishing, she would come in behind me and I could see her smelling me. And then
Mm.
if I turn around and make eye contact, she'd snarl. She'd lift her lips up like, hey, like, I don't like that. I don't like the eye contact. And I was like, okay. So so I just kept fishing and I'd look back at her and she'd, come and go and disappear. But she'd walk really close behind me. And then we just kept that engagement going over the next couple of nights. And then I think it was a few days that I can only assume was the alpha male came in the middle of the night howled right outside my tent. And just that whole engagement just crescendoed into me seeing the wolves every day. It was rare that I would go a day without seeing multiple members of the pack. And then some of the days they would be in and around the camp all day. And I'd see them fishing, I'd see them working, and I'd see them when I would exercise and hike. And even sometimes I'm outside shooting my bow, and they're one time two of the younger ones were sitting there playing with a plastic bag that had blown out of camp that I had to go get, and I did. But a plastic bag was blown across the tundra, and these wolves ran and grabbed it, and then one was running and the other one was chasing, trying to get the plastic bag from them, and I'm shooting my bow. And anyway, but it was really cool to be around the wolves.
Yeah, amazing experience. Like you said, again, spending all that time in the outdoors, just having those encounters with, like you said, wild animals, and yeah, just amazing story. That, oh yeah, I couldn't believe it when I heard that story.
No, it was perfect. And even the bear, I was working with this native guy. He's an awesome guy. Peter Gregory's his name. But I was exhausted because we were working such long days, and it was my first year. It was probably the second week, and the bugs are horrendous. I'm peeing in a bottle at night. I'm not standing up to put my pants on every day. And I've only been here 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. No, I bet it was even, you know what? I scratched that. I bet it was even less than a week. And I was laying in my tent going, all the tough guy stuff that I said to my boss in the interview when he's like, hey, are we going to have to come pick you up? Are you going to be able to handle it? And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I hunt and fish all the time. I camp all the time. I'm sitting there in my first week, let's just call it. And I'm like, I haven't stood up and put my pants on in 6 days. My mosquitoes have mosquitoes. And I'm just thinking, like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not talking to any of my friends. I'm not seeing anyone outside of this young lady that I worked with and these two Yupik men, like what? And so anyway, I work 18, 19, 20 hours a day, and I had to take a nap in the middle of the afternoon. I was running out of gas. And so I told Peter, I go, hey, Peter, I'm going to go lay down. Wake me up in 1 hour. And he said, okay. And then I said, wait, if you see anything cool, come wake me up. And he said, what's cool? What you mean? And I said, anything cool, just anything where you're thinking, that's cool. Come wake me up. He's like, okay. So I lay down and I closed my eyes for 5 minutes, it seemed like. And all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, Donnie." I said, "Yeah, Peter." He goes, "There's a huge bear here." I go, "There's not a huge bear." He goes, "He's maybe the biggest bear I've ever seen here, right here." And I'm thinking, he's got to be absolutely full of it. So I go, "Okay." And I unzip my tent, and I poke my head out of the tent, and walking right past my tent is, to this day, one of the largest brown bears I've ever seen in my life. And it was on a day, it was up against the Killbuck Mountains, which is a very pretty mountain range in Alaska. I'm looking across, let's just call it whatever, 30 miles of tundra in the Killbuck Mountains. And here is this brown bear. It was like an oil painting, Andy, walking past me in the tundra, and the wind's blowing, and I can see his grizzled furs just blowing in the wind. And, to put it in a hunter's perspective, this is a boar brown bear of massive proportions. Like, this is a record book, mature, I don't know how many feet it was, but 9+ foot brown bear walking past my tent, and the head on him like this, and the wind is blowing it. Just, and Peter and I just sat there and watched him walk right on by. And I looked at Peter and I was like, this is like that. I felt like somebody had lifted a car off me. Like, I'm where I need to be. I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Mm.
This is Shangri-La. My life has just been changed. Wake me up if you ever see anything cool again. I'm ready to go. Like, it was all the fuel in my tank. Like, I'm okay. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And yeah, Peter's just like, okay. And we went on, but it was incredible. It was incredible. It really was.
Yeah, having those encounters, like, yeah, I can only imagine. We don't have bears in Australia, but I've had some close encounters with some huge whales and stuff like that. Well, I've been out diving and like being in the water with them, and just breathtaking, really, isn't it? Like, like you said, you're pretty much just this tiny little speck, and they could probably crush you at any second. But you
Yeah.
just got to almost hold your breath, and just try and take it all in.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine being under the water and seeing a huge whale or a huge shark
Mm,
up close. I've never done it, and I want to do it so bad. I just think it would be so cool.
mm. Man, that's a crazy story. Yeah, wow. It wasn't phased by you guys. Like, it was, what was it doing? Just walking past, like looking for food through the camp, you reckon, or on its way past for a hunt? What do you think it was?
Yeah, probably moving. This is just a guess, but probably moving, because I never saw that bear again. Probably moving from one territory to another, right? Probably, like, the salmon hadn't come back yet. The salmon weren't in the river yet. We were there. This was early. We were waiting. We would get there and set our camp up and get everything totally ready. And then we wait on the fish, which is another, anyone that's not experienced it. Like, you're looking in this river, the water's crystal clear. There are dolly varden, which is like a little trout, and there are grayling, which is again like a little trout, but a totally unique looking fish. And the system's just quiet. There's no real seagulls, no herring gulls, no bald eagles really. I mean, you're seeing them a little bit, but no bears, no wolves. Just this meandering river. You hear the ripples, you hear the current. Occasionally the tail slap of a beaver. And then all of a sudden, one day you'll hear, and you go to the river, and here comes the first salmon going up the ripple, and then another, and then another. And as it's as though a tidal wave of life is coming up the river. All of a sudden, there are no fish other than a resident species. And then the next hour, there are fish. And when there are fish, there are eagles and wolves and bears. The whole system
Wow.
comes to life. There might as well be blood traveling down an artery, and everything is coming to life as it almost feels like, have you ever seen that cartoon, Moana?
Yeah.
You ever seen that?
Yeah.
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 At the end when you see all the, how everything's dying over the time because whatever the folklore, and then at the end when they replace the stone or whatever, all that life kind of comes to. That's what it's like, and so I can only imagine when I saw that large brown bear that there's no fish in the system yet, and he must have had an area that he liked to fish, or he must have been looking for the fish, right? He was probably up in the mountains. That's where I would imagine a bear like this would most likely live. And then he might have literally just been impatient and walking downstream saying, okay, I'm either going to go find a moose calf, or I'm going to walk until I hear fish in the river, and then I'm going to start fishing, like something along that. If I'm making a guess, but yeah, he walked past us. We were oogling at him, and Peter and I were talking. He was probably only 30 yards away. He never even looked at us. Didn't even look up. Just, they walk like the big ones. They walk kind of like a tractor trailer. It's like their belly button is a pivot point because they're too fat to just bring their legs forward like a small bear would. So they have to, the front legs got to go around, and then they have to bring this big sausage from the back around. And they kind of walk like this tractor trailer, if you will, like a semi. And they just kind of articulate in the middle because they're so big. They're like a big fat, like they're like your dad or your uncle.
Man, amazing to see. Yeah, wow. Funny,
Yeah,
mate.
incredible.
So I know you've spent time and you love or spending a lot of time up in the Arctic Circle, going bow hunting and stuff like that. What is it about that place that resonates with you, mate? And do you go solo there? Yeah, like talk to us a little bit about your experience in that Arctic Circle.
One thing that I've kind of, so I've thought about this myself, like what about that really speaks to me? Excuse me. And the number one thing is there's no trees. I think that's my favorite. There's no trees other than some small scrub bushes here and there along lakes. But it's as wide open as you can imagine. So the animals can't hide there. Um, Caribou, bears, wolves. Obviously, animals can hide there, but you get my drift. When you look around, you get to see the whole landscape. It's not like being in Australia where you're looking at the bush, looking for buffalo or looking for pigs or looking for deer. You're not looking at the bush going, I have no idea where the buffalo are today. I've literally, if they're not out on the floodplain, I have no idea where they are. We have to go in the bush and actually like walk around until we see spoor or track. It's just like that. You're not sitting here in the Northeast United States or wherever where you're sitting there looking at these big hardwoods or these big pine forests in your glass and going, I don't know where the elk are. I don't know where the moose are. There's no trees. And so I literally climb up as high as I can as a mountain, and I sit down. I dig out a little spot for my butt, put down my little pad, sit on my pad so my butt doesn't get cold because everything's permafrost up there, and literally just start picking the landscape apart. And I'm like, there's a falcon. Oh, there's a pack of wolves. Oh, here's a grizzly bear. Look, there's a grizzly bear a mile away, and he's walking up the valley. And I'm watching through my spotting scope, right? He's eating berries. Oh, now he's digging for squirrels. Like it's National Geographic right in front of me.
Yeah,
And I
wow.
get to watch it all. And then when I happen to see caribou, because that's what I'm hunting is caribou. When I happen to see caribou, I'm looking at them and say, okay, there's a really big mature bull there. All the other herds, okay, they went down along that river and they went up through that split. Okay, put my backpack on. I'm hiking to that split, keeping the wind right, hiding from the caribou, sneaking to that split. And it's almost like that, the Native Americans used to build, and if I'm mistaken of this, I apologize, but used to build like little rock huts, a little rock wall that they would then sit behind to hunt. Like they would see the traditional patterns of caribou, and they'd build these little rock huts and different things to hide behind so they get close to the herd because they knew that the herd was going to do this next year. Well, it's kind of almost like that. Like I'd slip in and find like one little bush or a little alder, or get into a little creek bed where I'm down into the actual stream and I've got my bow and I can see their antlers, right? I can see their antlers just walking down. I can see their tops, and then just sitting there and watching one bull, two bulls, and then here comes the big old bull, with his white mane, and and then just, that moment as an archer, I'm sure you feel this as a spear fisherman, you come to full draw. I used to panic in this moment. Like when I used to come to full draw, I used to be like, oh my God, it's going to happen. And a lot of emotion and a big, wow, this big explosion. But now, you come to full draw and you just see kind of like the history of man in a flash. Like all these images popping into your brain, you are entering into this realm of predator and prey. You're entering into this native human being in the world. I don't care the color of your skin. I don't care your tribe's name. I don't care if you're a mutt from Europe or you're born on this land. You kind of enter this realm of man supplying his own food and doing it in the wildest of a place,
Mm.
and having that calm of having your bow at full draw and seeing your sight picture of your broadhead on that animal's shoulder, and everything's quiet and you hear the wind and just pop, and it's it's the most incredible place in the world. But I think that's really, when I think about it, the night sky is bigger than I've ever seen. The northern lights, the falcons, the grizzly bears, the ground squirrels, the blueberries, the fish that return there. It's just, I think the fact that there's no trees or very few trees, it just opens up the whole landscape to come to life to your eyes, and I think that's really, and it's also, there aren't a lot of people there because it's a long way to go and it's kind of a scary place to go and it's cold, and I like that. I like that kind of, I like that you have to suffer to go there, and I
Mhm.
like that you have to risk your life to go there.
It's like a bit of a final frontier sort of a place, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But I've heard you talk about being in a place like that. It forces you to be present, like truly present in that moment, and take in all those little, which is sort of food for your soul, like we've been talking about. You've obviously got a lot of food for your soul, the way that you lived your life and the experiences that you've had, though. But yeah, you want to talk a little bit about being super present in the moment and the enrichment that that delivers to you, as opposed to living, like you said, your 9 to 5. I don't really think that's living, to be honest. But yeah, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, the more comfortable we become, um, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Michael Easter, the guy that wrote The Comfort Crisis, but that would be a good interview for you.
I
And
don't know.
he's an amazing man. Um, but the more things that we do that are comfortable, and the more things that are just this monotonous 9 to 5, or even just anything in our lives, whether it's pouring a bowl of cereal or changing the oil on your truck or anything that's just, you're just doing it because it needs to be done and you're moving through it. Uh, these are the things that are just stealing time from us. And it's not that changing your oil is stealing your time, but how you change your oil is stealing your time. And where your mind is when you're doing some of these things is really what's stealing your time. And the the element of the wilderness that makes you become a little bit more present is everything takes real thought, and everything takes, whether it be getting water or finding a little bit of firewood, or nothing happens without it being a chore. And so in some regards, um, you become more present because there's more work to be done, more real work to be done. If you don't go get water, you're not going to have water. And so literally, if you have to drop 1,000 feet down to a river and go get water, well, you drop 1,000 feet, so you're burning these calories to go down to the water. You're not hunting today, or you're not hunting this morning or this evening because you have to go get water. And so you go down there, and then as you're approaching the water, you can hear the water, which is taking away your sense of hearing. And so, and as you get near the water, you start seeing more bear tracks, and you have to slip through the alders to get to the edge of water, which is where the bears also travel. And so you kind of have this hyper focus, and you're just getting water. It's as simple as all you have to do is go over and turn your faucet on when you're at home. But here it's taking all of these senses to kind of go get water, and it's this hyper focus. And then I trick myself because I have to do it too. I'm like everyone else, or all of a sudden at the end of the many times in my life, my day starts with an alarm clock, and it ends with me chasing my tail the entire day. It's not that I get to watch beluga whales fish for salmon every single day, but I have to harness those moments when it happens. So I don't want anyone to have the delusion that everything I do in my life is wild and that everything I do in my life is of movie quality. It's not. I have the same bad days. I have the same days where I run like a madman all day and I sit down at the end of the day and I say, I was super busy all day today and I accomplished not a
Mm.
single damn thing. Like
Mm.
literally I accomplished nothing other than running myself into a circle and into a frazzle. And so when I'm in a place like the Arctic and I'm going to get water and one time I took a photography class in college and I just so happened to work in a hospital when I was in this photography class. So for a couple of the assignments, I would go into surgery and I'd photograph patients having surgery for some of my projects. And one time I was showing my professor these photos of this guy was bleeding out. He lived, but this guy was bleeding profusely from a ruptured artery, and you could see the blood spraying out. And I took a series of photos from like the whole patient where you could see blood like running off of his leg and dripping onto the floor. And then I took another one where you could see the blood actually, like I caught like a spurt coming out of the artery. And then I took another one that was a pool of blood on an apron, on a gown, on the floor, and you could see where it was starting to clot. And you could just see the texture of the clot. It almost looked like pudding, if you will. And it's kind of what a big blood clot looks like. It looks like this congealed pudding. And he looked at that photograph and he's like, "Oh, that's cool." And I thought he was gonna like the photograph of the whole scene, or I thought he was gonna like the photograph of the blood spurting out of the artery. And I said, "Why'd you comment on that one?" And he said, "Oh, it's more interesting than the other two." I said, "Is it?" And he said, "Yeah, the closer you become to something, the more interesting it becomes to you." And so I've taken that to heart. So even when you're looking at a leaf, if I hand you a leaf and say, "Andy, check this out," and you look at it and you go, "Oh yeah, okay, cool," and you just discard it, and okay. But if I handed you a leaf and I said, "Andy, you have to spend your entire day with this leaf. I want you to sketch it. I want you to feel it. I want you to write a paragraph describing how it feels, how it smells, how it, every what does the edge look like? What do you think? What kind of tree do you think it came from?" And you were going to dictate and you were going to do all it. You would have a far more intimate experience with that leaf, and that leaf would be so much more present in your mind and leave a much different impression on you than if you just checked out and said, "Oh yeah, cool." So when I go get water, it's kind of like that aspect. Or I know if I'm going to the Arctic, this is really what it is. If I go to the Arctic for 14 days or 20 days or whatever, I know that the moment I step off that big jet at the airport and I collect my bags and I go over to the hangar and I start reorganizing my gear to put it into the Super Cup to go out, I know that the clock has just started. That's what it is. It just started. And so I know that I'm here for 14 days or 20 days or 10 days, whatever it is. And so I have those seconds of this trip to harness all I can. And when I'm getting in a bush plane, I look at the wings and I look at the struts and I look at the wheel and the pilot and I look at his hands. I see the cuts and I look at the paint chips falling off the dash of the airplane. And I try to just get as close to everything as I can because I know it's going to force me to be mindful and present rather than if I just get in a plane and somebody says, "Hey, what was the plane like that you flew in?" And I go, "Yeah, it was red and white, I think. I think it was red and white." No, I want to know much more about it. And in fact, I drove yesterday when I was in Alaska. I drove past an airplane that I've flown in a couple of times for different bear hunts and a goat hunt. And I was just traveling yesterday, but I drove past that plane and I actually pulled over on the side of the road and took my binos out and I glassed this plane. It was in Homer, Alaska. There's a dark green and mint green de Havilland beaver. I just looked at that plane and I just thought to myself, you know, one day, many, many years ago, I was getting my gear stowed in that airplane to be flown out. And I was just looking at that plane. And then, and that pilot one time, I was with two buddies of mine, Frank Harris and Ken Gates. We were hunting black bears and mountain goats. They're both biologists. They were my bosses. And so I'm looking at this airplane yesterday, and I remember the three of us hunting together in that airplane. And then one time we were in camp, and all of a sudden we heard an airplane, which once you're in the wilderness, hearing an airplane again kind of like spurs, like triggers you to be awake, because very often you don't even hear airplanes where we go unless the guy is coming back to pick you up. So I hear an airplane and we're eating dinner, and I looked over at Frank and I said, "That's a beaver." Because you can hear it kind of sounds like an old muscle car, like oh, it's a really deep engine. I go, "Is that a beaver?" And he's like mid mouth. He's like, "Yeah, that is a beaver." We looked over at Gates and we're at Gates. "Is that a beaver?" Like, "For sure." And then we see this plane, and I said, "It's a green beaver." And I go, "We flew in on a green beaver." And they're both like, "Yeah, that plane was green." And all of a sudden it lands and then taxis up to our camp. We're eating dinner and we're like, this guy's not supposed to pick us up for like 8 days. And he rolls into camp and he hops out on the floor. He's like, "Hey guys." We're like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "Pack your stuff up." He's like, "We got to go." He's like, "A typhoon is hitting here in a couple of days." And he's like, "I got to get you guys off this island. Like, you can't be here. It's like a storm came out of nowhere." He's like, "We got to go. Like, pack your stuff up right now." And we're throw all of our stuff in the bag. But anyway, I stopped on when I flew in that airplane before. I wasn't present. I didn't even know we flew in on a green beaver. Like I did, but I had to like jog my memory. Like, hey, was our beaver green that we flew in on? And when we saw this plane coming in, but yesterday when I glassed that beaver from the road, I was like, all that stuff came flooding back, and so now I want to steal those images as much as possible, so that when I see that beaver again, or whatever it is that I see again, or whatever it is that I experience for the first time, I want to steal. I know the clock on my life is ticking, so I want to steal as many of those images as I can, because I know that these experiences that I'm having, that's really what my life is. That's really what my life is going to consist of at the end, whether it be cut short or I die as an old man. Uh, yeah, that's what I'm here to harvest, if you will. That's what I want to take with me right now.
And when you leave though, like if you spend that time, I think it's a great analogy what you're saying there. And if you spend that time when you're out there, by taking those little snapshots and being present, because it's going to be over really quickly, right? And they're the things you're going to remember when you come back. If you've got so many more memories and so much more, like you said, such a deeper thought process of being out there. It's a lot more enriching when you're coming back and you remember that trip, like you said, for all those little things, and far more in-depth sort of memories of each trip, I imagine.
Yeah, that's it's funny is when I see somebody with a large animal, big moose or big bear, or huge fish, or you know, that's why it's not that I'm a trophy hunter. It's not. I think there are plenty of people that are. I know lots of people that are absolutely consumed with inches of antler or feet of a bear or a skull, whatever. It's ridiculous to me. But if you if I meet you at the docks, let's say I'm in Australia, let's say I don't know who you are, and I'm there traveling with my mate Nick Joyce, and we just happen to be down on these docks, and you come in with your buddies from a spearfishing trip, and you're unloading your catch on the dock, and I come over and I see, you have a huge whatever it is that you just shot. Let's say I see several species, and then you have this massive tuna that you shot or whatever it is, I just automatically think, what happened with that one? Like, what? I just assume like maybe you were more present on that one, or what. It's the same reason we cast a lure to the unknown of catching a huge fish, or um, I think what people don't realize when they see guys chasing big caribou or big moose or big bears, they think that it's this ego thing. And I think for a lot of people it is. But really, for me, it's this opportunity of the rarest. Is to see an animal that is very rare to see, very difficult to see, very it kind of forces you to get closer, it kind of forces you to take in all these details. It hyper it you know, it your heart starts beating out of your chest, your vision is that much more acute because this is such a rare instance. And so that's where these grandiose stories come from, and that's where that grandiose feeling comes from. But I think that has translated from our forefathers and our grandfathers of having this unique experience of killing a massive moose, which lent to a lot of meat, because every moose with a huge rack has more meat on it than a moose with a little rack. So I think that's where a lot of this stuff kind of,
Yep.
and then we also, you come from, as far as North America, you come from guys like President Theodore Roosevelt, who started these gamekeeping traditions because they wanted to know, hey, where are the biggest moose being grown? Not so that trophy hunters could go to these areas and harvest a big one, which is what it's become. No, he wanted to know, where are these animals doing well? Where do they need help? Where can we lend our conservation efforts to change? And then so, they started looking at all these things and looking at different record book heads and different weights of animals. And so that's what just drives me, is when I see something exceptional, whether I did it or you did it, I want to talk about it, and I want to know what you saw, even the instance that we spoke of before we started recording with you, and what you had to do in your job recently. It's kind of the same thing, like hyper focus. Every second mattered. Every second was another photograph in your mind that you have all the details to. And then another second, you went to the next photograph. What happened? Well, his arm moved here. That totally changed. Well, what happened in the next photo? That's what I want to know. I want to know what you saw. I want to know what your mind was thinking. It's just absolutely fascinating to me. Does that make sense?
It's crazy. I was was talking to a couple of guys, like ex-high military sort of guys, and that, and exactly what you're saying, like those snapshots and the way that your brain will distort time, etc., to be able to take those big snapshots, and the way it puts it all together in the aftermath of how it's trying to categorize it and stuff like that can play some pretty crazy, good or bad, depending on the incident. But even like you said, if you've been out and having all these experiences, your mind's just full of, it's just full, isn't it? Like you said, you go out for a crazy hunt or an amazing 14 days or whatever it is trip, your mind's so full, like you never sleep better. I just find that that's what keeps bringing me back to the outdoors in general, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Mate, also, so, you've spent a lot of time outdoors and that, but there is that hunting aspect to it. That was one I wanted to sort of move into now, like, being a hunter. You touched on it with, our ancestors and stuff like that. It is in our history. And I know I've heard you talk about it before, and a lot of people, but, hunters may be sort of almost frowned upon these days and stuff like that. But everyone who's here comes from the generation of hunters, right? So I find it a little strange that, I guess, it's out of fashion now or whatever, because you can go to the store and just buy your own meat and have no connection with it. Most people, like you said, wouldn't even care or consider what they're eating, where it's come from, how it's died, etc. Can we talk about what draws you to be a hunter, and those, the opportunity to provide your own meat and share it with others, etc., like that, and what that means to you?
Yeah. And Yeah, it means everything to me. It used to, when I started hunting, it meant very little to me. I didn't understand. I didn't think about. I wasn't mindful enough to actually break the whole process down in my mind. To me, when I was growing up, which is really funny because in the beginning, when I read about these authors' experiences, Jack O'Connor, and I saw the photographs and I'd see the artwork in these books, whether it be a painting or an actual photograph, um, and I'd read the words next to the photograph. It was very eloquently written out, and it was very perfectly written out in the sense of if you held the correct mindset, you could appreciate this written word and you could understand why this man was adventuring to where he was and why he was seeking the types of animals that he was, and then and where that how they were describing the meat back at camp and how they cooked it, and kind of the rewards, that they're all enjoying the spoils of their hunt under the stars and by a campfire. And so I'd read these words and really I just got lost. The adventure, because I was a boy, the adventure, I got lost in the adventure. I got lost in the guns, the travel, the airplanes, all the kind of danger and flashy part of it. But I lost the sense of what they were really doing there was to fill their life with adventure, much like I'm doing now. And then also, um, to have that experience of sharing meat that you now have collected off the mountainside with the men that you have collected it with, and having those stories and sharing those moments. And so once I started realizing, um, I used to squirrel hunt with my dad occasionally, and I absolutely loved it. And we'd go out and we'd hunt squirrels, and we'd shoot 2 squirrels or 3 squirrels or 4 squirrels, and people kind of balk at that now. I think very often, unless you have hunted squirrels or are a squirrel hunter, you kind of balk at that. Like these little
Mhm.
things you see in a city park, like who would hunt those? I would hunt those, and they're amazing to hunt, and they're difficult to hunt, and they require marksmanship, and they require you to be present in the woods, and they require you to move with thought, and require you to be very stealthy and to sit still and have patience. And then we'd shoot these squirrels, and then I remember, um, my dad hated skinning them because they're tricky to skin. Their skin is really really tight to their musculature, so they're tricky to skin. And so I always told him, like, hey, I'll skin them, because if I did more of the work, my dad, I would, this is my thought process, was that my dad would take me more. So I said, I'll skin them. And I'd skin these squirrels, and I'd hold their flesh. And with squirrels, you basically get down to where you have 2 front legs, 2 back legs, and then, their whole body, I guess, it doesn't matter how big the animal is. And so I'd cut them in half, let's say at their belly button, then I'd cut them in a quarter. And so you'd have these basically 2 hind legs, 2 front legs with a piece of the back. And then we'd fry them in butter and we'd eat them like chicken wings essentially, and they're so good, it's stupid. But that was the beginning, and that's when I didn't realize what I was doing, but still went through the whole process. And then I started realizing how much, when I would kill a deer or when I kill a bear, I started realizing what skinning it meant to me, and then holding its flesh, and then I started realizing that this animal was a thing. And that's what really started to connect me to my meat, is when I realized that if I don't pull the trigger or release the arrow, this deer gets to keep being a deer, or this bear gets to keep being a bear. Because I've passed plenty of animals where I just wasn't in the mindset. And when I watch them walk off, it's just like, yeah, he gets to keep being a bear for, essentially the rest of his life, whether he gets taken by another hunter, killed by another bear, falls off a cliff, wherever his journey's taking him. I didn't end it today. And
Mhm.
so then I had this, when I do release an arrow or shoot a bullet, having this appreciation of, once the animal dies, then taking it from stem to stern, the pleasure of skinning it, taking its meat, and then breaking that down, and then basically being ultra present in that experience to the point of when I'm in the kitchen and I'm pulling it out of the freezer or I'm cooking it fresh on the side of the mountain, like it is a cornucopia of events that I have belonged to, from hiking into that area or sneaking around in the little woodlot with my 22 for squirrels. It's that investment into what it is, and it's just earning your calories, just like you would in a gym or running or um anything in life. The harder it is, the more you're investing, the more rewarding you get from it, the more you actually lived to experience this moment, this day, this time. And you don't even think about it. I don't even think about it when I'm in the grocery store and like I'm out, let's say I get caught. I'm eating a moose right now. That's really what I'm eating. I have some Canada geese. I have a couple of wild turkeys left from last year. And then I have a lot of moose meat. So that's what I'm eating right now. But if I get caught, like today, I don't have anything thawed out because I just got home from Alaska, and I'll thaw some stuff out. But if I didn't, and I was just going to go to the store, or I'm at a restaurant with people or whatever, I don't even really give my food any thought at all. I don't even, I try now to go to the right places, do the right things, appreciate my moments. But really, unless I've invested myself into it, it's very difficult to kind of have that ownership. And I think with hunters today, and I hate to say it because I don't want to cause any negative connotations or thoughts, but some of the hunters today that I see, Andy, just kind of are hunting for different reasons and chasing different accolades. And there are so many shortcuts these days. Now, there are very little shortcuts. And at one time, if I'm being honest, at one time, many, many people considered the airplane to be a shortcut. And so I'm unbelievably guilty of using airplanes. But in the beginning, airplanes and pilots, these very gifted bush pilots, opened up the backcountry to people like me that weren't going to ride a horseback there. I would have, but I just hadn't yet. Airplanes were already greatly in use by the time I was an adult. And so I followed suit and used airplanes. If airplanes weren't being used, I would have ridden horses or taken boats or whatever it is that need to be. But, at one point, airplanes were considered a big hack, if you will, to access the backcountry. But now with, game cameras and with all these just different things that really open up technologies of being successful, I just think that the woodsmanship has fallen, which really greatly impacts hunters and greatly impacts the opinion of hunting. The marksmanship has fallen, which again, I think greatly impacts the hunter and greatly impacts the view of the hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I think when hunters were looked at more favorably in society is because the skill set was heavy and it was earned. And I think when young men and women or even men and women that didn't hunt, when they saw a hunter, there was no debate of the ethics because everyone ate meat and everyone had to procure their meat in this particular manner. And hunters were very often regarded as the most prominent men in society because they had skill sets that would protect the home. They had skill sets that would provide for the home or provide for the tribe. And I think that's where we've slipped, is that there's been some measure of ego involved in the weight of animals or the size of the antlers, and there's been a lot of technology to offer shortcuts or comforts along the way. And I just think with our skill sets slipping or lacking, and our provisions also falling by the wayside, where the society assumes that they don't really need the hunter anymore in the tribe because the grocery store is there through factory farming, through factory ranching, whatever it may be. I just think that's where the kind of the supply and demand has went away, if you will. But I think if hunters hunted what I describe as well and good with the highest of ethics, the least amount of technology and access, and just kind of get back to learning their craft, whether it be woodsman, marksmanship, knot tying, where to set up a tent, how to start a fire, how to butcher an animal, um, you know,
Mm.
how to get a hypothermia, where to hide in the desert if you're overheating, like all of these elements of survival. I think if hunters started leaning into that more, and and um, and then leaning into conservation a bit more as well, I think the opinion of hunting and hunters would come around. But as you well know, you and I both know that we're instead of talking about such elements, we're talking about things like chat GPT and and other different technological advancements and electrical cars, and it seems we're stemming the other direction. But I think you understand where my opinion
Yeah.
lies.
It's funny, having the podcast and talking to like-minded people. This is a very similar theme, None of them wanted to or could think of anything worse, I guess, than sitting inside or an office type job or that technology and all those things. They're not high on the priority list for the people that seem to be in this. Of course, you have to live your life. There is levels of technology these days, etc. But yeah, it's not high on the priority list amongst the people that share these common traits.
Yeah, and I think about this stuff, like what and we're all different, but I think about what people spend their money on, and I think, you'll see things on, let's just say, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. You'll see things where somebody will take a picture of a huge mansion with Lamborghinis out front, girls on a yacht, and I read these titles like, oh, I'm going to be rich, or this is what successful people, this is what my life's going to look like in a couple of years or whatever. I see these things kind of like bidding towards success. Like, do you want to drive this car or this car? You can drive this car if you do these 10 things. Do these 10 changes in your life, and you'll be driving a car like this. And I just think to myself, like, no
Another
freaking way,
die.
man.
Another die.
Like, absolutely, you can have the mansion, you can have the yacht, you can have the girls, you can have the Lambo. Like, no thanks, man. Like, I'm no, I'm trying to go to far off places and do different things. Like, no.
Do wild shit. I like it, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tony, one of the topics obviously I wanted to chat with you about was bears and bear hunting in general.
Yeah.
In Australia, we don't have bears out here, so I guess there's a level of or lack of understanding. I've heard people say before, why would you want to hunt a bear? I guess people see a bear in a zoo or sitting there quite placid. It's just sitting in a caged off area, getting food thrown to it. So I guess people develop a way of thinking that, they're quite a cuddly, soft, nice sort of an animal. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the ethics around bear hunting and reasons for herd management, etc., and the level of impact that these bears have, the amount of numbers they are over there, and the way they're managed, and the level of impact that they can have on like caribou species, and how decimating they can be if they're not managed.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll just skim over it so that we can have a conversation. Then, if you want to dive into anything, it's very easy to understand why people don't want you to hunt bears or think that bear hunting is kind of wrong. And if you spend any time at all watching bears, you know, if you and I go on a black bear hunt or a brown bear hunt, and you see a bear that you're gonna hunt and kill, we go into the stock, and you're kind of watching these bears, and you go into the stock and kill this animal. That's one type of bear hunt. Kind of another element of a bear hunt is where you see a bear in a location that is not in a good stalking location, and you end up having to watch them for a while before you do a stalk. And sometimes, you kind of understand what people where their heart kind of falls. And let's say you and I are on a very similar hunt. We see a large black bear that we're going to hunt and stalk, but we're forced to watch it for a few hours. watching the antics of these animals. They're so human like sometimes in their movements and their comedic kind of little instances, how they roll over things, how they'll trip and fall. Um, I hunted this brown bear one time, this very, very large brown bear. I didn't kill him, but he was massive, and I was stalking him with my bow. And while I was stalking him, I got up on this knob and I was glassing him, and I saw him in these alder bushes. And then while I was watching him, he literally laid down in kind of a whirlpool, if you will. And he was kind of laying on his back in this mud puddle. And he was just laying there, and you could see his big belly. And he was just laying there. And then he wanted to chew on his toes. He wanted to chew on his toenails, but he was too fat. So he kept bringing his foot up, and he'd like try to get his foot, and he'd go like this, but he couldn't get it. And then you'd see he'd take a couple of breaths, and then he'd give it a go again. And so, I was watching it with a buddy of mine, and we were chuckling to ourselves because it's quite honestly like watching your fat uncle take a bath, right? It's just like, who is this guy? And so you kind of see these elements of why people see bears and think, well, why in the world would you want to hunt that animal? But truth be told, in a lot of instances, bears do very, very well to be hunted. And in instances where we don't hunt them because of the attractiveness to people, that's more often than not. It's very rarely that we're not hunting bears because they don't have the population to be hunted. It's far more often that we are not hunting bears because people don't want us to hunt them because they're trying to lean on tourist dollars. You'll have resorts that don't want people hunting bears because the more bears that are running around the woods, the more bus trips that they can drive you down some paved road and say there's a bear and there's a bear, and
Right.
it's ridiculous that you think that is more beneficial to a bear than killing a bear, because bears very quickly will eat themselves out of house and home. Bears need massive territories to hunt and fish and to forage, and large boars only tolerate a certain level of stress in their lives, whether that be from other cubs, other females, other young boars. And there's a lot of competition for food, and so bears, where they do well to be hunted, where there's a stable population, a growing population, they do very, very well to be hunted. And their flesh, which is such a misunderstanding, is a lot of people will shoot a bear, and even there are a lot of laws, which I wish they would change these. I quite honestly do. There are a lot of laws that say you can kill a bear and take its hide and take its skull, but you don't have to take its meat for certain species. Like grizzly bears are generally noted for not being very good to eat. Same with brown bears. And then some people have that notion about black bears as well. They say, well, if a bear's been eating berries, it's good to eat, but it's been eating fish, they're terrible. They have worms. They're and I've been in camps before where I've hunted bears, and I've killed a very large, very old black bear, and when we skinned him out, his fat was kind of yellowy. There were worms, there were things going on. He had tapeworms and stuff. And the two gentlemen I were with that were skinning the bear with me, they're like, see, we're not eating this thing. And I said, we are eating this thing. We 100% are eating this bear. And they're, no. So I said, just hear me out. So we butcher the whole bear. We get the whole bear back to camp. And I clean the bear up. They want nothing to do with it. And where I am legally, I don't have to take the bear meat, just to be crystal clear. All I have to take is the hide and the skull. This is an area that is very high bear population. The carcass, even if I leave the carcass in the woods, it's not going to go unutilized. Ravens are going to eat it. Eagles are going to eat it. Other bears are going to eat it. The Mother Nature is going to come to this carcass, and it is going to be a life source for many, many animals, until it's reclaimed by Mother Nature. But as it were, I'm being a little bit greedy, and I'm taking the flesh with me because I love black bear meat. So I took it. These guys wanted nothing to do with it. So I cleaned it up, prepared it. We had a dinner party at a cabin a few nights later. I cooked the bear, and it was gone. They ate it in entirety. They wanted more. They were asking me for recipes. They
Hmm.
want to know if I was going to take the rest of the bear home with me. Could they have some? They wanted to prepare it for friends and family to show them. And so it was just kind of breaking down walls of what is actually edible. And and so, it's very easy to see why people don't want you to hunt bears, because they're such an amazing creature. And if you watch them, they have different elements of them that are very human-like, but they do very, very well to be hunted. Their flesh is amazing to eat. It's very rich in protein and nutrients. And then I've not experienced this myself, meaning I haven't baked the pie with it myself. I've eaten it many times, but many, many friends of mine, their wives, people up in Canada, and some of the people in the northern lower 48, they render down their bear fat, and some of my buddies' wives say it makes the best pie crust that they've ever using it in the dough. And I've eaten it many times. I've never baked a pie with it myself, but they're incredible animals. They're incredibly nutritious. Their hides are stunning, and where their populations are stable or growing, they do very, very well to be hunted. Now, there's an other side of this element, and it's the impact that bears have on ungulates, caribou, moose, elk, deer. And for instance, I did a predator hunt this last spring in Western, or kind of South Central Alaska, if you will. I call it Western Alaska, but it's really kind of South Central. In this area that we're in, it's a 2-bear area. There are so many brown bears in this area that actually the state of Alaska wants you to shoot 2 bears in this area. Other areas of Alaska, let's say Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, areas like this, you're only allowed to shoot 1 bear every 4 years. So here we are in Alaska. Here's the state of Alaska. Here's the Panhandle. Here's the peninsula. Kodiak Island sits right here. So Kodiak Island in the peninsula, were you to hunt brown bears here, it's 1 every 4 years. But up in this area of South Central and Southwest Alaska, there are so many brown bears, and they have such an impact on the moose population that they want hunters to take up to 2 bears each, and you can do it every single year.
Wow.
And the reason is because the brown bears do so well there that come calving season for the moose, the bears, they know where the moose calve, and they will just walk incessantly along these rivers. They'll circle lakes, and as soon as a moose, they'll even follow a cow, and as soon as she drops her calves, boom, they'll pounce on it and kill and eat the calves. And so obviously some of the moose are successful in calving because the moose population is there is a recruitment every year, but there's a tremendous loss in both the caribou and moose in this area. The Mulchatna herd of caribou was kind of decimated by overhunting from people, and then also from the caribou just having a general crash. But now that the population was overhunted by people, and I think the state of Alaska learned, at least that's my summation, is that these populations, because this population of caribou lives so close to a major metropolitan areas where airplanes could reach them pretty easily, that they got overhunted, in my opinion. But now that they're down, the brown bears are just wreaking havoc on them, and they're calving, and so between them and the moose, like this bear population has to be taken down quite a bit. And then there are areas, same with black bears. There are areas where black bears are, stable and probably slightly growing, but most areas I would say are actually trending towards quite a bit of growth and would do very, very well to be hunted. But you know, it's very easy to see why somebody can't get on board with hunting, because we take an animal's life, and when you look at a forest that's empty, when you get out of your car at a pullout, where you're going to take photos, if you're driving down the freeway, let's just say in Alaska, you're driving down the highway and there's a little pullout of a really pretty area, and you pull out and you say, I'm going to take some photographs, and a tourist gets out of their car and they see a moose or they see a grizzly bear and they're able to take photos or just even see them. And they're like, oh, here's this huge landscape. And I saw one moose or I saw one bear. Wouldn't it be great if I got and looked at this landscape and I saw 10 moose or 10 bears? Wouldn't it be great if we stopped hunting and these animal population could grow to where there's animals, you know, to where there'd be more visible to us? But that's really not what is going to happen for the most part. Is, you know, if we stopped hunting in a particular area, populations would grow a little bit more, to a point where there'd be more individuals, but that just means there's going to be more loss of life in other areas. Like the population has to have this immigration has to have this recruitment from young being brought in, but there needs to be a die off as well. And it's kind of a utilization of this resource. The resource is going to kind of bulge and live in and of itself. But if we're not sitting there, taking control of this population, watching this population, taking some individuals from it, it's going to end up growing and growing and growing and going through certain crashes and going through certain elements that Mother Nature is going to do anyway. And so we can have our cake and eat it too. We can regulate these species. We can actually have great hunting, bring lots of finances into the economy, lots of finances into the conservation realm, and really manage the population and also observe the population. Very, very often, if it wasn't for a hunter, no one would even see these animals, not ever. You know, like a lot of people deregulated, or they took grizzly bears. They made it illegal to hunt grizzly bears in British Columbia. I would guess the lion's share of people that voted to stop grizzly bear hunting in British Columbia live in Vancouver and have never seen a grizzly bear, will never see a grizzly bear. They put on their Patagonia jacket, they put on their Patagonia puffy jacket to go downtown and get a latte with their friends, to walk down to the city park, and you know, they're not ever gonna venture out into the wilderness where you might see a bear, be attacked by a bear, hunt a bear, watch a bear fish, whatever it may be. And so they're kind of involving themselves in a system that they have no business involving themselves in. Hunters we're the first line observers. Biologists want to talk to us because we're the ones seeing the animals, we're the ones seeing the habitats, we're the ones seeing kind of like, hey, you know, I'm seeing things changing, and very often we have all this data report when we get done with the hunt. I don't think a lot of people really realize that you know, we're being the state of Alaska. State of Alaska wants us to report on our hunts, to figure out the data and see what we saw, see what we accomplished, how long were we out there, what happened, you know, and it's just a really fantastic way to conserve animals, to have true conservation, true habitat restoration, and to really keep an eye on a population and engage in. And bears are no different than deer species.
But I've heard that like a male boar or whatever will be, you know, he'll have his area of territory or whatever, and he'll be so dominant there, he'll basically kill anything that's in there that he doesn't want there. Like, may not even eat it. Like, he'll just literally kill like other cubs, other bears, like just for this. They're so sort of savage that they will kill everything, like basically everything, and maybe only eat a small portion of what they do. But they'll go through and just kill everything, right? Is
Yeah.
is that
So,
right?
I mean, I've heard different elements like that, and there is some truth to that. There is, you know, brown bears will, big male boars, black bears, brown bears, grizzly bears. Sure, polar bears are wanderers, so it probably doesn't fit them as much, but they have their territories, right? And it's a massive territory that they have, and And when they kind of move through it, this is their place. Like they don't have another predator outside of man once they get to a certain size. And so boars will predate on cubs. Females will come back into estrus. If a boar can get rid of cubs, that female then becomes an available female in the near future. And so just like most anything in Mother Nature, this boar grizzly bear, let's just say, or this boar brown bear, he wants his genes to continue on in the system of population. He doesn't want another boar's genes, and so when he sees cubs from another boar, he's going to kill him. He might even kill the sow, which is odd because you think he just got rid of a female, but if he has an opportunity to kill and sometimes eat or not eat, but if he has an opportunity to kind of stake his claim in his territory, very often they do it, and oftentimes they don't. Like I've seen big boars walk past sows. I've seen sows attack big boars. Like I've seen a sow with cubs, kind of chase a boar and the boar run away. Like, geez, like lady, like what is your deal? Like I'm just going down here, but it all seems to stem from territory and resources. Like if there's a year where there's a lot of fish, that boar will tolerate a lot. His belly's full of salmon. He is fat and sassy. If there's a time when there's a lot of berries and a lot of fish, doubly as good. He is, has a lot less care in the world. But if there's a year where the fish run is really small, or his fishing spot has changed in some manner, or there's another young boar trying to stake up a claim in his fishing area, or a sow with cubs has moved into his fishing area, that is very dangerous for her and her cubs. Like he will kill them just for being there, just to get his resources back to him. Like he's greedy in that sense, right? They're not bloodthirsty killers, but they are they will kind of have that chicken in a hen house, right? If you get a fox in a hen house, you get a fox in the hen house, he'll kill all the chickens, even though he's only going to take one or two to eat, but he'll kill all the chickens because his mindset is kind of that to do so. So I think it really comes down to a lot of resource allocation, resource management. And again, that's where you start looking at a population of bears. They can be left alone to do whatever it is that they're going to do. And, people will get attacked, which is fine. A lot of human beings are like, well, just wait till the first human gets attacked by a grizzly bear. And I'm kind of, like, it happens. Like, if you're going to go out in the wilderness and you're going to hunt fish, or even you're a birder and you get mauled by a grizzly bear or killed by a grizzly bear, so be it. That's how life has ups and downs. And sometimes when a bear's on top of you chewing on your skull, that's, it's that's on the downside, but it happens. And so like, just because you're a human being and because you have an Aunt Millie and because we get together for Thanksgiving every year, doesn't mean that you get to be absent from the rules of Mother Nature when you're out in the wilderness. Everybody partakes in predator and prey when you open the door and you go out into a certain area. And so, but if we leave these things to be unchecked, well, then it starts to get kind of really messy. And like I said before, nobody's really paying attention to these systems. So, bears are killing bears. Bears are gonna kill people. Resources are going to get overtaken, and then all of a sudden, then what do we do? Let's say we stop brown bear hunting in South Central Alaska or Western Alaska, and we're just like, you know what? Let's leave the bears alone. We're only here to hunt caribou and moose. And then all of a sudden, the caribou and moose hunters, because no one else will tell you about it, just the caribou and moose hunters will be the ones coming to the state saying, hey, I've been hunting moose here since I was a little boy. We see 20 to 30 moose in a 10-day hunt every year, and we usually kill 1 to 2 bulls during this hunt. But now we're going to the same place where we used to see 20 to 30 individuals and kill 1 or 2. And now we're seeing 1 or 2 moose and we're not killing any. So what's going on? And again, only the hunters will be the ones reporting those numbers. No one else is going out in these areas and even paying attention. And even a fly fisherman goes out to this area, unless he's going to the same area, unless he's engaging with this wildlife, he's not going to be able to report back to the biologist and say, hey, something's going on with the caribou, something's going on with the moose. So, that is a very important job for a frontline observer, which is the hunter and fisherman, to kind of maintain these populations, kind of observe these populations. And I think that's an important element that people often forget about. But
Hmm.
bears do very well to be hunted where their populations are stable or growing, and the other wildlife in their region do very, very well to have those bears hunted, and maybe even a tad over hunted. If you were going to go, if there's this kind of ebb and flow between bears and moose, and the bears are steadily rising, the moose are steadily falling. Well, we want to hunt the bears and maybe reduce moose tags to get it back to here. But even if we were to get it to here, and this is unintelligent what I'm speaking of right now, but this is just a theory. If we were to get the bears even down a little bit to where the moose start growing a little bit, and there's some harvest huntability hunting opportunity, well, that's okay. Like that is an element that we can deal with. Or if the moose population is slightly down and the bear population is up, and we have a really good huntability resource here for the bears, that's okay. So like,
Hmm.
it's just kind of keeping these things as in balance as possible, and really being a frontline observer to kind of understand what's going on. But bear meat's delicious. Bear hides are beautiful, and removing a couple of large boars from an area over a season, um, I think has, for the most part, only a positive impact outside of that individual boar losing his life. I think that's really the singular detriment. Um, but really, the population, both the bears and the moose, tend to grow and tend to flourish from the removal of that one old boar or a few old boars.
Yeah, right. And mate, in specifically hunting them like with the bow and that, they're a pretty soft animal, aren't they? Like their body is fairly sort of soft. Like it's an arrow will generally penetrate like pretty easily through a bear. Is that right? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
zip right through them. Bears are designed to fight other bears, right? So their head is big, their jaws are powerful, their forearm is massive. They have huge biceps and huge pecs. And from here forward, from their pecs forward, they're designed to fight another bear. And then you kind of have this big soft spot in between, like below their pecs. You talk to the backside of their rib cage, their guts, up until their kind of their belt line, if you will, is the arrow's going to blow even from like a 50-pound compound bow is going to blow right through them if you hit them in the right spot in the rib cage. And then you get back to their rear legs, and it becomes big and powerful and muscular again. So you want to stay away from the front and the back, but in the middle, yeah, they do very well to be hunted in. And there's a bow hunter from Alberta named Archie Nesbitt. He shot a 10-foot plus bear on video. Fred Bear has done it. Um, I'm Craig. I'm losing the gentleman's name that had the former world record. Anyway, Jack Brittingham shot a monster on film, and you look at all these bears, and some of these guys are using little tiny broadheads, but the arrow's going in, and within not even 30 seconds, these bears are expiring, and they're not even going very far at all. And for me, I've shot probably the biggest bear that I've shot. The biggest black bear that I've shot is over 7 feet, over 400 pounds, and my arrow hit him, and he died in probably 8 seconds, 10 seconds, something like that. He went 10 feet from when I shot him. And same thing, to bring it back to you in Australia, like I arrowed a very large water buffalo in the Northern Territories, 35-yard shot. I think it was a 660 grain arrow, and I put it literally on the X for that bull. And I mean, he died in less than 10 seconds. I mean, it was over with before before he even knew what was up. As he was starting to retreat from something that had happened, he's spun around and took a big exhale of blood and fell over dead.
Must have been a Cayuga broadhead, mate.
It wasn't a Cayuga, but I'm using those guys now. It was a God, what did I shoot that thing with? I think it was a grizzly stick head that I shot that with, but the Cayugas, oh my word.
I was talking to Joel about them the other day, and I was actually chatting with a couple of boys just on text this Arvo from Cayuga, and they said, "Oh, because I put out a little bit of an ad about the episode with Joel, and that I mentioned those boys in it, and they said, "Oh, thanks for mentioning us, whatever." And then
Mhm.
they said, "Oh, there's another guy. One of his mates, Donnie, he uses them too." I said, "Oh, well, I'm chatting with him tonight, so I'll have a chat with him about them."
Yeah, I've only shot one animal with it so far with my longbow, but it was devastating. And I just ordered before I went to Alaska, I just ordered more 175 grain heads from them, and then they just came out with a wide bleeder cut. So they have bleeders on them on the pilot cut, and
Yeah,
then I
the
just
Zots, I
ordered
think.
wide bleeders.
Oh yes, extra wides. Yeah, I think they got a
Yeah,
Zot.
yeah,
They got a Zot as well, which doesn't have the bleeders. I think it's a little bit bigger as well. A lot of guys are using now.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
sounds good, mate. Shot placement on a bear, mate. So, like, are you trying to double lung it? How is that? Is that yeah behind the shoulder a little bit? Like, where are you? Are you waiting for a side on shot, or can you do frontal shots on them, or how does that? Like, what do you like to do there?
Yeah, you can take a frontal shot. I wouldn't unless the situation dictated it. And that's the one thing with big bears, not necessarily black bears. You could, because of a black bear, you could fight for your life. I'm not saying you're going to win, but let's say you're an archer. Let's say you're an archer, you're by yourself, and you don't have a gun, which I've done many times. Um,
Hmm.
and a bear is approaching you, and it's coming from the front. Well, that's up to you to take that shot or to eventually just say, hey bear, and he, hopefully turns and runs off. But if he does attack, you have some chance to defend yourself with a black bear, some chance. You take that to a grizzly or brown bear, that chance starts to diminish greatly. You're not going to defend yourself. You're going to play dead. You're going to try to get that bear to think that the threat has been eliminated as fast as possible so that he or she is going to leave thinking that you are done, so he or she can leave with a clear conscience of that you're not going to hurt them, and then you can get up and retreat. But if I'm bow hunting a brown bear, grizzly bear, and my guide is behind me with a rifle, which is the state law in Alaska, and that brown bear sees me, and because very often, like if they see you, very often they're going to turn and start coming at you to see what you are. And they're going to come at you. And I shot a grizzly bear that I have right over there. I actually missed it because my arrow hit a twig, but it's in the other side, our film, the other side, you can see this bear coming around a bush. And once he kind of sees us, he starts coming. And, this thoracic inlet, the little circle where your head plugs into your rib cage, if you pop a bear right there below their chin and the arrow goes in, that's as your rib cage comes up, it comes up to the hole that your spinal cord and your neck come out of. But if you can punch an arrow right down through that hole, basically where their heart sits and has their dorsal aorta comes off their heart, the largest artery in the body, and that runs down their spinal cord. The arrow goes in right above the heart and cuts that dorsal aorta off, and they're dead in just a couple of seconds. They bleed out in less than 10 seconds. But so you can shoot them right there. And with a big bear, you might have to take that shot
Hmm.
because with a 10-foot brown bear, if he's at 20 yards and he's coming and you're at full draw, the incidence of you standing up going, hey bear, whoa, hey bear, that might not work at that distance. Like he might say, holy cow, I'm in danger, the bear. And he's like, I need to pounce on this thing, make sure it's not going to hurt me. And if they do that, you're in big trouble. Like you're at very least, you're going to get chewed on probably scalped, because they oftentimes they try to bite the top of your head and they try to puncture your skull. But oftentimes humans have, our heads are too big, so their teeth just slide up, ripping all your flesh off and basically scalping you. And then they're going to bite your arms. They're going to bite, you're going to have to try to play dead as best you can while getting chewed on.
Mm.
And
Jesus.
so you could take that shot, because as soon as the arrow hits them, hopefully they're going to retreat. But you're going to have to make a really good shot. But yes, generally, you don't want them to know that you're there. You want to get into a position where that bear is going to be walking by. You're going to want him to be slightly quartering away or totally broadside. And you don't want to tuck it too tight to the shoulder. Their lungs are a little bit further back than a deer, but just a couple inches off the shoulder and zipping all the way through. And it's money. Like he doesn't even know it yet, but he is very, very dead. And I would take a frontal shot on a grizzly bear or a brown bear just because of the incidence of it's kind of now or never. But you generally want to get yourself into a position where you can shoot one when he's walking by.
Yeah, right, mate. What about their senses? So, no doubt they've got an amazing, like scent through their nose. What's their eyesight like? Do they pick up movement? Is that all? And their hearing, etc., or is it mainly their nose that is their main tool there?
Their nose is the best. Like people can't, it can't be overstated. Their nose embarrasses a deer's nose. It's not even comparable. It can't even be discussed in the same conversation. I don't know what the percentages is, but let's just say for ease of conversation, a bear's sense of smell is 10 times that of a deer. And a deer's sense of smell is ridiculous. Like they can smell where we stepped 3 days ago and it flips them out. Well, a bear can smell that infinitely better. And so I've heard, I've read, and I've heard that bears have poor eyesight. My experience is that they don't have poor eyesight. My experience that I think people have, and this is just my opinion, I think people have watched the casual nature of how a black bear, grizzly bear, brown bear reacts when they see a human. I think they've mistook that for having poor eyesight.
Mm-hmm.
I think a bear has, eyesight like we do. I think they can see as good as a human or nearly as good as a human or slightly better than a human, however you want to say it. I don't think they have amazing eyesight because they have, for their body size, they have really tiny eyes. Whereas that's how I kind of look at things.
Mm-hmm.
And is how they're designed. So like, you look at like a bald eagle in their eyes, or you look at an owl and obviously they have big eyes because they're looking at night, but you kind of can see this where their eyes are positioned, how their eyes are positioned. And so, brown bears have relatively small eyes. And so I don't think they're using their eyes nearly as much as they're using their ears, and certainly not as much as they're using this massive nose at the end. But I do think they're using their eyes, and how I've seen them around me is that I see them see me because their body language oftentimes changes. It's subtle, but they kind of look at you and when a bear sees you, I mean, oftentimes when they see you, they just split. Like they will retreat so fast that your head will spin. It's insane how fast they will run away if they see a human being very often, but sometimes they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, they kind of like they'll be walking, you'll see them, they'll look at you out of the corner of their eye, and then, they just kind of keep an eye on you, and they'll, either angle towards you or they'll angle away. But I think people have mistook that as like, oh, he didn't see me. But I think they have pretty decent eyesight. And as far as their hearing goes, I think their hearing is pretty keen. I mean, it's difficult to give a level of their eyesight or hearing because we so often end up talking about their nose.
Mm-hmm.
But I think their ears and their eyes are just fine. It's just that their nose is of another world.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, incredible creature, like you said. That's a good insight into there, mate. Yeah, you got some knowledge and obviously a fair bit of experience in hanging out with them and observing their behaviours. So, yeah, well, I'm sure people will get a fair bit out of the knowledge that you've imparted there.
They're incredible, man. And the one thing that I don't have any experience with is I've been around a lot of black bears, and I've been charged by several black bears. I've been around a fair number of grizzlies, both in caribou hunting, moose hunting, and then also grizzly bear hunting. I've been around a fair number of brown bears, same caribou, moose, and brown bear hunting. Um, but I've never had any experience with being out west in the United States. And I hear people telling me this, both hunters and non hunters alike. And I don't want to diminish this because I have no experience with it. But if I see a grizzly bear when I'm in Alaska, I take note of where it is, the distance, the size, what the bear is doing, and in relation to like my camp. Let's say I'm not bear hunting on, and I see a grizzly bear. I want to understand, okay, is this bear living in this valley? Am I going to see this guy every day? Is he kind of heading towards my tent? Should I head towards my tent to make sure he's not going to go in my tent? Because, the tent is kind of my last, outside of just wilderness survival, my tent is kind of my last resource here. So if he goes and destroys it, that's not good. And I know if he's going to go to destroy my tent and I'm at my tent, he's very likely to run away. So I kind of am judging that stuff. If I see a bear walking across a ridge line and my tent is over here and he's heading in that direction, I have to contemplate, like, do I abandon my stalk or my hunt, go to my tent to defend my tent, not with lethal force, but just with my human scent. But I've heard the grizzly bears out west in Montana, Wyoming, are very aggressive, far more likely to attack. And I've just heard things from people like, man, like you really got to be on your P's and Q's with bears out here. And I haven't experienced it myself, so I don't want to speak to it. But yeah, I've heard those bears can be quite a bit more aggressive. But what I would say to your listeners, by and large, bears are not, they need to be respected, and you need to have some awareness of bear biology and how to move about them. But they're not monsters in the forest. They're not bloodthirsty. They're not out to kill you. They are just existing in their space and in their territory, their habitat.
Yeah, wow. Amazing. Yeah. Love to get the opportunity to observe them in the wild one day, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mate, there's a little segment called the Your Yarn segment. It's a time where we usually get the guest or the person on our podcast to talk about a memorable hunt or a good or bad or a memorable time from being out in the outdoors. And I heard you once talking about a mountain lion hunt that you went on and being mindful of time. Obviously, we've been going for a little while, but yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was an extremely interesting story about the way that what that lion was doing to uh, cover its tracks almost and get a free
Yeah.
hunt for itself.
Yeah. It's really cool. So a good friend of mine, Ben Storak, lives in British Columbia, and he invited me up. He has a new hunting territory that he acquired a couple of years ago, where he hunts mule deer, California bighorn sheep, mountain lions, black bears, and he has some moose and stuff there as well. But so he invited me up. We're good friends, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to host you on a lion hunt." And I said, "Yeah, thanks, Ben. I don't really have any interest in hunting lions, uh, and and I don't really have any interest in hunting over hounds to chase a lion, tree it, and shoot it." And he's like, "Okay, well." He kind of called my bluff. He's like, "Well, you're the guy that's always saying, like, don't knock it till you try it. You should go at, if you're against hunting, you need to open up your mind until you experience it and talk to a hunter and talk to a good hunter and experience fresh meat from the wilderness. Until you do those things, I really don't want you to judge hunters or hunting." So he's like, "I'm kind of calling you out a little bit." So I said, "Okay, well, that's well said. I'm was judging a book by its cover. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come on a lion hunt, but I'm not promising you that I'll kill a lion. But I'll come on a lion hunt. And he said, okay, that's cool. And so I showed up there, and he picked me up at the airport. It's freezing cold outside, lots of snow, and he got in the car and he had kind of a little grin on his face, and um, we had bought some donuts from a local bakery, and so him and I were driving up into the mountains eating donuts. Actually, I think he wasn't eating donuts. I think I was eating donuts. But we were driving up in there, and he goes, "Hey, I found a large cat track, and I'm really excited about this cat because this cat's been around for a while." And Ben kind of said something like he's been, and I might be misspeaking here, but I think Ben said something like he's terrorizing local ranchers or whatever, something like that. I think Ben might disagree with me, but it was something along those lines. I was like, okay. And so I said, but first I want to meet with a ministry biologist, and I want to talk to him about lions. And I want to see like what he feels like about the lion population in the Fraser River Valley. And long story short, I went and met with the biologist, and he said, "Yep, we would love you to take an individual, Donnie, to harvest an individual." And he goes, "If I'm being honest with you, we'd love for you to take two." He's like, that's how many lions are there, and that's how hard they are on the deer and sheep. I was like, okay. So I bought my lion tag. We went up to camp, and the next morning, basically, we kind of all split up to go look for lion tracks and to see what happened. Lion hunting is largely a painted picture from what happened the night before. If there's a new skiff of snow, if the lion hunted last night, he'll leave tracks, of course, and then we can start hunting him. But if the tracks are multiple days old, we don't know where he could be or what he's doing. But lo and behold, I went up valley, Ben went down valley, and Ben struck the track of this large lion that they've been seeing. And he knew this because this lion had tore one of its pads on its back foot really bad. And so even though it wasn't hurting the lion really, I don't believe so, when the lion would take a step, he would leave a little dab of blood every time in the snow. And because it was in a certain part of his pad, it just was kind of like he was re-injuring it while he was walking. So one thing that I found very interesting was right away in the morning, we found this lion. He walked right through a huge herd of cows and calves in the morning. I mean, he walked quite literally amongst the cow and calves in the morning. And we had talked to the rancher and got permission to cross his land. And he's like, "Yeah, I've been seeing that lion." And he's like, "You're welcome to come on my ranch and hunt it." He's like, "But he doesn't bother my," and I kind of asked him, I was like, "Does he kill calves or whatever?" He's like, "No, he's not touched my cows." He's like, "I see him walking, and he'll walk literally right through my cows, and my cows will barely even react to him." So I thought that was interesting that cows and calves, barely even reacted to this huge predator walking amongst them. And he was cutting. What he would do is he would go up into the conifers, up into the pine trees, up into the bush, and then at night he'd come down and cross these grazing prairies, and then he'd drop into the cliffs above the Fraser, and that's where he'd hunt sheep and deer. And so we got on his track, and it was too dangerous to release dogs where we were because it was such steep cliffs and it was so icy. So we just tracked it on foot, and he was pretty easy to track because of his bloody steps. So we knew we were always on the same line, and we kind of just tracked him. And so we slowly just tracked him through, and he would lead us to all of these kills. He led us, I forget the number now, these stories kind of all start to blend together, but he led us to something like 12 or 13 or 14 kills or something like that. It was a huge number of kills.
Amazing.
We'd see him, he'd kind of go around this bush and then down into this ravine, and then we'd be like, "Oh, there's a dead mule deer." We go investigate it, and we'd see wolf tracks too. And then we go up, and And then we'd find a dead sheep, and then we'd find a dead mule deer, and we'd find a dead doe mule deer, and we'd find a dead young buck, and we'd find all these things. And then one of the times we literally come over a hill, and there he is. The photographer that I was with, William Altman, he's like, Donnie, he's right there in front of us. And if I had a rifle, we could have shot him right there without even using dogs. Like, he was on top of a doe yearling mule deer. He had killed her and he was eating her. And when we came over the hill and he looked back at me, he was so angry that we were interrupting his breakfast. He turned and looked over and he looked black to me. It was really funny because I've heard several people tell me that they have seen black jaguars in their lives in the United States, which doesn't happen. Jaguars have been photographed in the United States and Arizona. They come up to kind of the Jaguar highway, if you will, from South and Central America. They come up and there's been photographs of jaguars in Arizona, things like that. But all the ones that I've seen have been of spotted jaguars, not the black variety. But anyway, many times when I've been out west, ranchers, farmers, hunters of like, do you know that there's a black panther here? And, they'll say like, I saw a black jaguar, and I just listened to them because it's not true, but I know that they think they saw something. And then when I saw this lion, it occurred to me, I was like, oh, I think they're seeing cougars, because this guy, when he bristled up, because he was angry, when he bristled up and he puffed his tail up, he looked black. Like, all of his fur looked like it turned black because he was bristled up. And he slowly walked up this hill and he kept looking over his shoulder. He slipped away. And we continued to follow him. And then we ended up getting up to the forest, and he had crossed this road. And we hiked something like 24, 25, 26 kilometers on foot, or maybe 18, 19 kilometers, whatever it was. We hiked a very long way following him on foot. And then we released the hounds, and it was very, very physical, couple of hours, nearly waist deep snow, mostly knee deep and mid thigh deep, and sometimes waist deep snow going up this steep mountains incline. And we treat him once and treat him a second time. Massive animal. And I thought he was going to be panicked when I saw him in the tree. I thought he was going to be panicked because of the dogs. I thought he'd be ears back, snarling, swatting, but he wasn't any of that. He was just sitting in the tree, totally calm and kind of annoyed by the dogs. He even jumped out right in front of me. I was the only one that saw it. He jumped out right into the dogs, and then he ran down the hill and then went up another tree. And it so happens that's where I shot him. That's where I killed him. But long story short, I did kill the lion. I thought it was a very old male. It turned out to be a 3-year-old male, which was amazing because of what a machine he was at hunting. And he was 185 pounds. So a very, very large lion in just a 3 years time span, and in a very successful hunter and a very large specimen for the area. And so it was really cool to kind of be involved in all that aspects. And then the lion meat ended up being, it's literally probably the best wild game I've ever had in my life. It's absolutely fantastic table fare. And so it's just a very, very rewarding. And that's actually him behind me over my shoulder. See that hide?
Yeah. Yep, got him there.
The rafters.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's him right there.
But on the sport killing side of things, Donnie, so
yeah,
he worked out that he was stashing prey for the wolves. Is that right? So then basically they would leave him alone to eat his own meal. He would kill for them basically, and then leave them as decoys. Is that what you worked out?
That's right. And so when I talked to the ranchers, and this is funny how perception goes. When I talked to the ranchers, they said that this lion was sport hunting. He was killing deer and leaving them, killing sheep and leaving them. And then when I talked to some of the other hunters and the houndsmen, kind of the same story. It was almost like they were villainizing this animal, almost justifying our right to take it out of the population. Like, hey, he's a sport killer. He's doing this. He's doing that. But when I ended up talking to the ministry biologist and actually doing my own research, I found that what he was being harassed by packs of wolves. The wolves were lazily stealing his kills. He's far more efficient at killing than they are. And so they would just follow him. And when he would kill, they would steal it. And so and again, I'm doing the same thing that the hunters and the ranchers were doing. I'm making a summation here. But what the biologist says, they very, very often will start to kill animals and they'll just leave them to give the wolves something to eat so that they can go on and kill and have their own meal without being harassed by 2 or more wolves. So, if it's just a cat on a kill and there's a single wolf, the wolf is going to be in big trouble if he tries to mess with that cat. Like, it's going to be a problem for him. I'm not saying the cat's going to kill the wolf, but he's leaving with a big problem. He's going to have holes in his body when he leaves. If it's 2 wolves, maybe even the same situation. But then with 2 wolves, one wolf can face the cat and the other one can go around and kind of start biting at the cat's tail, biting at his back, which now the cat turns around. Now this wolf comes in and bites his butt. It starts to get kind of a yin and a yang. And well, you add a 3rd wolf to that. Now we've got a problem, right? Now we got a wolf facing you. We got a wolf biting your side. And we got a wolf biting your butt. And so that's where a cat is probably like, I've had enough. I'm out of here. You guys have it. And so that's what it really turned out. It seemingly turned out that that's what this cat was doing, was not necessarily sport killing these animals, but killing his animals so that the wolves would kind of have something as well. And the wolves would leave him alone.
Crazy, man. Yeah, I thought that was a cool story. Like, so intelligent, that animal, like working that out to then just, yes, all for the fact to let itself have some peace while it could have a meal.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that the biologists, it's not that they're anti-predator. They're not anti-predator at all. But it's just that the sheep are kind of stuck in the cliffs along the river and in the mountainsides along the river. It's this narrow band of habitat for the sheep. And so, it's an amusement park of hunting for them. So as long as the cat comes out of the hills, I'm sure he kills deer up in the hills and is successful on rabbits or whatever it may be up in the hills. But once he comes out and crosses that pasture and he drops into those cliffs, those sheep, that's their habitat. That's where they live. That's where they use the escape routes. And they just become such successful hunters that's why the biologists want the lions really kept in check, because one lion, I forget the numbers now, but the biologists were telling me how many sheep a lion will kill in a year. And just a single lion or 2 can wipe out a whole population of sheep if the sheep are in a small region and the lions aren't kept in check. Like, they can really, really hammer the population of sheep. And so the biologists are trying to be very, very careful. The sheep are very difficult to manage. They're very limited. And so, this is what I was telling you before with the grizzly bears and the moose. It's probably okay if we have slightly too many bears and the moose are suffering as long as we're hunting the bears. It's also probably okay if we have slightly too many moose or a good amount of moose and not a great, the bears are down a little bit, as long as we're hunting the moose and keeping them in check. Well, this is one of those situations where the lions are here and the sheep are down here. And so really, like, and Ben hunts the sheep, but he kills 1 a year. I think he has maybe 2 tags a year where he kills, and he'll go and kill 2 mature rams that probably weren't going to make the winter. So the rams that Ben is shooting, they're 10, 11, 12 years old. They're not going to make another winter or 2. So he's really removing nothing. But these cats are way up here, and so they can have great effect on the sheep. And so that's why, Ben has started, the area that Ben got when he got it hadn't been cat hunted for a long time, hadn't been bear hunted for a long time. So Ben went in there and really started hunting the cats and the bears quite a lot, not too much, but quite a lot, to try to, he's trying to bring these numbers down and try to get some more preservation on the sheep. And he's also doing, he's also going to coalition conversations with domestic sheep, because there are issues with domestic sheep spreading movie, spreading a disease to the wild sheep and having a horrible impact on the wild sheep. So it's not just predators
Mm.
and prey. It's also disease. It's also human intrusion. It's also loss of habitat. You know, there are a lot of like anything in life. It's not black and white, right?
Mm.
Right now
Mm.
we're doing this podcast. There's my box and there's your box, and there's a black line in the middle. That's not what life is really about, right? There's this blend that we have, and and so it's managing all of these different things from animals to predators to people to farmers, ranchers, habitat, you know, weather. It's kind of everything. But that's where it kind of lies. Is you have the sheep way down here and the lions way up here, and so that's why when I went there and I learned about this, what I wanted to make sure of was that the sheep weren't here and the lions were here. And as hunters, we were villainizing the lions to justify killing them. And so that's why I wanted to talk to biologists. I wanted to make sure that we were somewhere in here before I started hunting. And then once I found out it was actually like this, I was like, oh yeah, I'm happy to remove a lion. And then I also learned a lot about the houndsman. This is a side note, but it was really amazing to watch the dogs work and does it feel like cheating a little bit? Oh, for sure. Like, could I kill that lion without the dogs? 100%. If I was gun hunting, 100%, I would have shot that lion before we even released the dogs. Um, it was a difficult and dangerous bow shot to take. You know, I would have had to shoot at a lion walking away from me at like 80 or 90 yards. That's not a shot to take. Um, if I was starving to death, would I have taken that shot? You bet your ass I would have, but not in this hunting scenario. I'm not going to shoot that animal like that. But in releasing the hounds, I got to watch the dogs work. I got to watch the houndsmen work. Did we kill the cat? We did. But I do believe, whether I had to convince myself this or not, I did my research, and I do believe we left the area better than which we found it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, crazy story. And yeah, I just found that super interesting. An amazing creature, that obviously the mountain lion, right? Pretty high up on the list, predator list.
Yeah, they're so talented. They are so talented in how they move, and they're silent. They have huge claws. They have huge feet, and you know their jaws are meant for, you know, they clamp onto the throat, right? And they just like, they're very very good at killing. Very very good.
What would that thing have weighed?
This one was 185 pounds. This was like 100, 185, 190 pounds. It's a large cat. I've heard of 200 pounders. I've
No.
seen photos out of Alberta of, I think, what cats that might go 200 pounds. I think a lot of times when people say one is 200 pounds, they're probably full of it. And they actually haven't weighed it. But I have seen some cats out of Alberta that you know, and I've also had some people that I very much respect tell me that their cat was nearing 200 pounds, or however you want to say it, and that I believe. But I couldn't believe, like, when I broke the cat down to his back straps and his front quarters and his hind quarters and then his inner loins, like all the meat we took, I couldn't believe how much muscle mass he had acquired in 3 years of life. Couldn't believe it.
Amazing, man. Awesome creatures, right?
Oh, and they're so cool to see. You know, obviously that's just his hide. But when I saw him standing on the limb, I couldn't believe the musculature and he had a big belly, you know, because he's been eating that mule
Mm.
deer dough, and he's just, so powerful. So such a cool animal.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Hello, buddy. We'll change things up a bit here, bud.
Righto,
Okay.
folks. Felix here. It's time for the most important part of this rock show. Your funniest fuck up.
Righto, buddy. So you're funny as fuck up. This is the most important part, brother. Let's.
Um,
You spent your whole life out in the bush, mate. You must have fucked some things up. Come on, what do you got for us?
many, many times. I have messed up in the realm of, uh, you know, once in the Arctic, I messed up with where I put my tent. This was a major mistake of, I got there. I was with William Altman, one of the photographers that I work with, and there was this cathedral of rock. It is so cool. It's on the top of the mountain. Great conditions to put a tent up. I mean, literally flat as a pancake with this little kind of granite shale, not sand, but almost like little particles of rock, perfect to camp on, flat as a board. We pitched our teepee, and we had a cathedral of rock around us on 3 sides. And I'm like, okay, so we are protected from the west, we are protected from the south, we are protected from the east. It's just a little portion in the northwest that our teepee is exposed. And so we set our tent up there. We were pleased as could be. We could see the whole landscape. Long story short, well, I think there's a reason that this rock was kind of eroded in a 3/4 circle, and it's because most of the weather in this area was coming from the northwest. And so that night it blew probably an honest 60 plus miles an hour. Didn't sleep at all. Packed up all of our gear, thought we were in a complete survival situation, and we were. Like, we put all of our gear in wet bags, dry bags, if you will, wore our rain gear, packed up our sleeping bags, like got rid of everything that could get wet if the teepee failed. And literally the wind blew so bad. So we have our teepee, obviously it's in the shape of a teepee, and it has a center pole. The wind was blowing so bad, the whole teepee, the whole side of the teepee was collapsed in against the pole. And we had a piece of granite that the pole was sitting on. And it was so windy that the pole eroded a circle through the rock at night. And so that was night 1. The next day was perfectly calm, and we were exhausted because we didn't sleep at all. And we thought, okay, that was rough, but we survived that. We should be good now. Well, the next night it blew like 70 plus, like hurricane force winds. And that was also an absolutely brutal night. Outside all night, watching our stakes literally rattling out of the ground outside of the rocks all night, pounding the stakes back in, and like it was a mess. So the next night we ended up moving. So that's a mistake, right? That's a mistake. I've had countless errors in the regards of falling in rivers, almost falling off of cliffs. But if you want something that's funny, one time I was coming back, we were sheep hunting in the Chugach, and I had to go poop. And so I went poop, and I came back, and I was wearing rain gear, and I came walking back, and William's like, "Hey, were you just going poop?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." And I go, what do you see? You seen anything? He's like, "No, but you have shit on your face." And I said, "I do." He's like, "Yeah, did you touch your face while you're going poop?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, you literally have shit on your face." Like, I had a line of shit like right here on my face. And we were dying laughing. And I ended up, like, I looked and I shit on my rain pants, on my boots. Like, it was an absolute mess. But I've missed animals at 10 yards. I've fallen. I can't even tell you how many times I've fallen or fell through the ice, or it's almost a constant, right? The errors are every trip comes with one. That's for sure.
They're the things you learn from, though, isn't it? You fuck things up. They're the ones that you learn from, right? You learn nothing from winning every time, do you?
No, man. Like it's so funny. I've been going to Alaska. I've probably been to Alaska 40 or 50 times. And this last year I hunted in Alaska, and we experienced something like 12 or 13, 14, 15 straight days of rain. My sleeping bag was soaked. I was using a waterproof, water resistant down sleeping bag from a very popular company. and the thing was soaked the whole time. And I'm not blaming that company. There's no way you could. The amount of water that I had my sleeping bag in, a trash bag would have been wet. Like it was just soaked. And so, like I learned, like I sat up last year because usually your sleeping bag gets soaked and you have a day or two to dry it out. Then your sleeping bag gets soaked. You have a day or two to dry it out. Your sleeping bag gets soaked. Well, last year we had like 13, 14, 15 days of straight rain. And it got soaked and it stayed soaked. Our clothes got soaked and they stayed soaked. Our boots got soaked and they stayed soaked. Like it was soaked. Everything was soaked. And still, like you get up in the morning, you're wearing wet long underwear. You're in a soaking wet sleeping bag. One that's supposed to have loft, like 18 inches of loft, and it's a noodle. And then you're putting wet socks on, wet boot. You're just getting dressed and soaking wet stuff, and then you're hunting dark to dark. Anyway, but like this year, I got home last year and I ordered a sleeping bag called a Wiggy's bag. It's a guy out of Colorado that makes some really technical gear, and he makes these sleeping bags out of a synthetic insulation called Lamilite. He makes very, very nice sleeping bags. I've never used one, but I have friends that use them and they swear by them because they're very functional when they're soaked. They're very, very functional when they're wet, but they don't pack down little like a down bag. They pack down, they're really big when they pack down. So, but I'll never take a down bag to Alaska again. Never. I mean, unless I'm on a sheep hunt and I'm going to be up in the mountains and I have to really like truncate my gear down, and when you're up in the mountains you have a little bit less incidence of having a rain. The mountains have a lot of weather, but it's not often that's going to rain like a valley will, where it will just sink in there and it's there like day after day after day. The mountain weather is kind of a little bit more volatile, but like it occurred to me last year, I was like, I've been coming here with a down sleep bag all these years. And now I bought a Wiggy's bag this last year. And I'm like, I doubt I'll ever travel to Alaska with a down sleep bag again, ever. And, so you learn these things, right? And then you learn how to calm and slow the process down of shooting so you don't miss animals at 10 yards or scoping yourself. I scoped myself last year, and I knew I was going to scope myself last year because I had to sight in a muzzle loader. And this muzzle was sighted in. I shot it a bunch, but I wanted to shoot it one more time on the trip to make sure, okay, it's good. And so I had a really crappy rest. I'm shooting 200 yards. So I had to lean way into the gun to get into the rest. And then I just squeeze the trigger like I always do, and boom. And I shoot. And then, obviously my head hurt and was numb. And I turned and looked at, the photographer, Sigmanta photographer, Forrest Rowe, and I turned and looked at him, and we both just absolutely bust out laughing because blood's just pouring down my face. God, we laughed so hard, and then, it's just anyway.
I think we've all been there on those ones, mate.
That's just so funny, man. So funny. Like it's a comedy of errors, and you want to make sure your missteps aren't fatal, right? You want to make sure they're funny, or you want to make sure they're uncomfortable. You just want to make sure they're not fatal. And really good men and women have fallen by making a fatal misstep. And I've been very close myself. And those are the ones you want to bury deep down inside and really
remember.
Really remember. Yeah.
I've been there a few times myself.
Mm-hmm.
Good times, mate. We'll wrap it up, buddy. I just got one last little question for you there, mate, and it was a slightly different path there. But if you could send your 20-year-old self a text message, what would you say?
Oh man, I would. That's a really good question. Initially, my gut reaction is to tell my 20-year-old self to drop out of college. And to educate myself and educate myself with experiences, and to become an annoying person who would attach themselves to gifted folks that I would want to learn from, and don't let them say no thank you, and don't let them say no, and don't let them say not right now, and embed myself in them and to learn from them I feel like, for instance, when I went and worked on tigers in Bangladesh and Nepal, I feel like if I just would have went and worked for all of these gifted biologists and never went through the courses, I feel like I would have learned more and the real information and the real biorhythms of life than going to college. But really, I would encourage myself uh, to become a mindful, present person, and to really understand that the only thing you're really chasing is your own life experiences. You know, we get so caught up with buying a car or buying a house or getting a degree or checking these boxes so that when we hand our resume to someone else, they look at it and go, oh, wow, like you've really done some stuff. But really, if you just go and seek that intellectual properties through experiences and through, read as much as you can, experience as much as you can, and you kind of push yourself in those manners and kind of let the flow of your life take it. I would really encourage myself to go down that road of exploration. I just think far too, especially when I was growing up. I'm 48 right now. I'm going to be 49 next month. You know, when I was growing up, everyone had to fall into this slot of what is successful, and then now with the internet, with cell phones, now the path of success has totally changed. And so, you used to not be able to get a job without that resume, and now I think you can really showcase who you are. And I think the biggest detriment to people right now, like some of the guys that write me and ask about jobs or ask about how do I do what you do? I think some of the detriment right now is that people don't really understand what the word authentic means. They think it is a catchphrase or a descriptor that is a positivity in your life. But really, if nobody's watching, and there is no Instagram, there is no Facebook, there is no making movies or writing books, how would you live your life? And if that is how you would live your life, then you can live your life in that manner and write the books and make films or whatever it is that you want to do. And people will be interested in it because that's who you are. But if you're forcing it at all, people will smell that out. And it's not very appealing to those of us paying attention. And so I think it's important to be yourself, and it's life is such a flicker of time that you have to convince yourself to harness every single moment, to be with the people that you really want to be with, to go to the place that you really want to go with. And there is no tomorrow, there is no next year. You just have to make the best of it and do what you can where you are with what you have.
Well, mate, that was I think that's a really good question, but and I'm fortunate enough to ask a lot of people this question, and to have the hindsight or the ability to listen to what people would say. Like I said, I'm mid-40s now myself, so I'd love to be able to go back and send myself a text message. But I really like the analogies you use there, and like being authentic, and especially because these days I've had a few people, senior guys of the bow hunting community and stuff, say, man, yeah, I think your podcast is quite authentic and stuff like that. It's not, it's not an act. I'm not trying to get likes, or I generally give a shit about this stuff, and love talking to people about, just like yourself, about all this, mate. And we'll wind it up there. But on that note, man, I can't thank you enough. I did chase you for a while because I knew you were busy, but I really wanted to pick your brain and have the opportunity to learn from you and work out, what type of person that you were. I had heard certain things, and they were all positive. But mate, the next time I hear someone who maybe doesn't have the understanding of what hunting is, or what a person who would represent hunting would be. I'll be playing them this podcast once I edit it up, because we've been going for 2.5 hours. I thought it would go for an hour and a half. But mate, so authentic, and just, you can, truly passionate, and a really fantastic representative of what I think all hunters of any aspect, or even just human beings, should try to be like. Because I just think, you sort of blew my mind a little bit with the way that you approached it, and that true passion for the outdoors, and the way that you live your life. So, mate, it's a credit to you. You're obviously a really great human being, and that is very evident. I'm sure it'll come across in the podcast. But wow, I'm super stoked that I got the chance to sit down with you and have you on, man.
I appreciate that, man. This is really thoughtful questions. I'm fortunate that I get to do a lot of these and talk to a lot of really interesting people, and sometimes, and oftentimes, even really interesting people. They kind of ask the same questions, because it's, our curiosities kind of lend to those same areas. But you asked really thoughtful questions, and unique questions that I'm not often asked. And so I think that's really shines true to who you are, and that you really do have these interests, and that you find these outliers, of talking about stories where I've messed up, and then asking about like you have a very good distinction of, discovering, talking about the lions, and talking about bears, and things along these lines. Is really cool.